All right, let's get a drive time Monday afternoon, 9 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. It's hot, but it's cloudy, keeping the temperatures down a little bit. It's going to be kind of a topsy-turvy weather week with some really hot days and a couple of random cold days later on. It's about 84 degrees, 85 degrees, and cloudy here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. Happy Monday to you, and as it is every single day, it's going to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That is Porter Larson behind the glass today, producing the program. It is a game day on the radio station as we will have Game 5 of the NBA Finals for you tonight between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers. That series is deadlocked at 2 games apiece. Since you and I last spoke, Oklahoma City was able to get it done in Indiana, closing out in historic form in a couple of different ways on Friday night, taking care of Indiana 111-104. We talked about the adjustments that Mark Daigneault might make prior to that game, and he made a lot of them. And so now the onus is back on Rick Carlisle and the Indiana Pacers to make their adjustments to try to win a game in a building that's almost impossible. Oklahoma City's really good at home. I think they only have one loss in the postseason at home. No, they have 2, actually, because Indiana won game 1. So we'll see what happens tonight as this series is deadlocked at 2 games apiece. 6:30 Mountain Time will be the tip time, and we'll say goodnight at 6 o'clock and send you over to ESPN's coverage of the NBA Finals. TV coverage, of course, is on ABC. Stanley Cup Finals continues to be wildly entertaining, and feels like it might be coming to an end tomorrow night in Florida, but you never know. We'd certainly love a Game 7. We'd love a Game 7 for both of these final series. Before we enter into the summer window and kind of tread water until football rolls along, Oilers-Panthers tomorrow is going to be 6 o'clock Mountain Time on Turner Sports. That's your TV coverage, and we're your radio home for the Stanley Cup Finals. A massive trade in the NBA that broke yesterday that caught a lot of people off guard. A lot of people off guard. We'll talk about what the Grizzlies elected to do. And good news for the Orlando Magic, in my estimation. We'll get into that deal. And then we'll kind of bring it around through the prism, the context of what it means for the Utah Jazz and what the Jazz will attempt to do this offseason. Brian Windhorst himself said that he has been told the Jazz are actively actually trying to add to this roster. I don't know how they'll do that. I don't know what it's going to look like. But if Desmond Bane is able to grab that sort of return, what could Lauri Markkanen bring if the Utah Jazz elect to go in that direction? NBA draft is right around the corner. It is, 10 days away from right now, I believe. Yeah, 10 days away. It is June the 26th will be the first round. Then June the 27th. June the 25th is actually the first round. June the 26th is the second round. And then June the 27th is the first round of the NHL draft, where the Utah Mammoth find themselves with the number 4 pick overall. Jazz, as of now, have 5-21, a couple second-rounders to boot, so we'll get to some NBA draft stuff on the program today. Big 12 released its basketball schedule last week. We touched on it. We'll go a little bit deeper, and we'll go a little bit deeper on Alex Jensen's roster now that it's basically finalized. We'll do some Utah basketball and, of course, some off-season college football at the same time. A lot of storylines going on. Real Salt Lake actually won a match over the weekend. They had not won a match since April 26th. They were able to beat DC United 2-0. Johnny Russell, do we need to start calling Johnny Russell Johnny Goals? 1 goal for Johnny, 1 goal for Gozo, and RSL gets a win, and they break that 7-match unbeaten streak. Diego Luna was tremendous for the U.S. men's national team in their first foray into Gold Cup play this year, as they beat Trinidad and Tobago 5-0. Diego technically had 2 assists, but one of his assists really should have been his goal. He had a little step over and left the defender in their dust, and then he had a really good strike. It just ricocheted off of a teammate, went to the back of the net, so the teammate gets the goal. Diego gets the assist. Nonetheless, he was the best player, in my opinion, on the pitch for either side. So a little soccer on the program today as well. Massive trade in the world of Major League Baseball that's catching a lot of people off guard. We'll get to that. So a lot to do on the show today. Good guest list on this Monday afternoon. Hope you had a great weekend or off to a great start to that work week. Happy Monday to you. Our first guest will be Kurt Schmidt, chief roster constructor for Real Salt Lake. After the weekend behind us where RSL was able to get 3 points, We are about, 3.5, 4 weeks away from the summer transfer window opening in the world of Major League Soccer. What does Kurt have up his sleeve? It's clear that this team needs reinforcements badly. Miller family has taken over as the primary ownership group. What sort of budget does he have at his disposal? So we'll get to that on the program today with Kurt Schmidt. We'll break down Game 4 of the NBA Finals and then preview Game 5 of the NBA Finals and talk about a massive trade in pro basketball with Tom Haberstroh. Richard Smith stops by for his weekly hit, 1 hour in studio. We'll do some jazz. We'll do some offseason NBA. We'll do some NBA Finals and his thoughts on Desmond Bane going to Orlando. And then the voice himself. Always good to catch up with my former radio partner and the voice of the University of Utah, Bill Riley. The voice of the Utes rolls by during the 4 o'clock hour. So Kurt Schmidt, Tom Haberstroh, Richard Smith, Bill Riley, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson, on a Monday afternoon.
Yo.
When we said goodnight on Friday, we wondered what we'd be breaking down on Monday, as we often do. A lot of radio shows do, like, let's predict Monday's headlines today on a Friday. Me and Bill used to do that. We got 2-2, and we're going back to OKC. Do you still believe in your fighting Indiana Pacers?
And I think we also said on Friday – the winner of that game likely wins the series, and I felt that kind of vibe shift in the series. But man, once you get down, Spence, when you handle your business at home, you steal a game on the road. When you do that in the NBA Finals, you find yourself 2-2. Man, best of three. Who knows what could happen? And yes, the Indiana Pacers absolutely have a shot at winning an NBA title. They've shown that they can beat OKC in a few different ways. So am I confident in them doing so? No, I think the odds probably lie with the MVP and OKC. But and I think this is going 7. I think it's going to be a fun one to end it.
Hope you're right. I would love to see a Game 7, so we'll get to it. It is a busy, busy Monday show, and it's great to have you guys along for the ride. Our first guest today on a Monday afternoon will be Kurt Schmidt. We'll do a little RSL. We'll get his thoughts on the U.S. men's national team as well, and then we'll go from there. But before Kurt rolls by on a Monday afternoon, courtesy of our good friends and your good friends too at Prize Picks, it's time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. 1 series left in the playoffs, and the championship is officially on the line. That means time is running out for you to put your final takes to the test on Prize Picks, the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. So here's what you do. You download that Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700. And when you play your first $5 lineup, they'll hook you up with $50. Do not even have to win that lineup to get the 50. It's on the house. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700, and they're going to give you $50 when you play that first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. All right, tonight I'm going to go under on Tyrese Halliburton, 17.5 points. I'm actually going to go under on Alex Caruso, 10.5 points. They have T.J. McConnell's line at 4.5 points, and I cannot stand T.J. McConnell, but I'll take more than 6.5 points. They've got the line at for Shea, 34.5 points. That's a big line, but I'm going over. I think Shea goes big tonight, and I think Oklahoma City gets the win at home, where they are a 9-point, 5-point favorite. All right. So, a couple things here. We'll do some hoops right off the bat, and we'll get to Game 5 tonight. Tom Haberstroh is going to join us coming up in the 3 o'clock hour. So we'll give you a big preview of Game 5 tonight. We're going to look back on Game 4. But far more interesting, in my estimation, at least on this Monday, is the Memphis Grizzlies have traded Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic in a blockbuster deal. So Desmond Bane, 5 years in Memphis. The Jazz had a chance to draft him, and they did not do that. And he would have fit in very nicely with that team with Donovan and Gobert, and obviously Quinn is the coach. So instead, they went Udoka Abuza, the big kid from Kansas, right? They drafted the big kid from Kansas that year when they had the chance to draft Azubuike. That's right. Udoka Azubuike, the big kid from Kansas. Desmond Bane, in 5 years in Memphis, really established himself as one of the best 3-and-D players in pro basketball. He is an absolute beast. He is a bull defensively. He's a knockdown three-point shooter. The Orlando side of this, the net for the Orlando Magic is, in my opinion, they instantly have catapulted themselves into the conversation next year as the best team on paper in the Eastern Conference. Now, when you look at who they have, and then when you juxtapose it to the rest of the conference, Cleveland probably, and this is bad news if you're a Jazz fan. The Jazz own all of these picks from the Cavs, but the Cavs continue to make pretty savvy moves to make sure they're a really good regular season team. If you're a Jazz fan, it doesn't matter that the Cavs potentially could fall on their face in the postseason because, Donovan. But in the regular season, if they keep scratching 60 wins, the draft capital you've received in return for Mitchell is never going to be good. So the Cavs on paper, they're really good next year. I'm going to use the term gap year. Like if you were one of those college students where, after your junior year, you were burnt out, so you decided to take a gap year and maybe work and then come back and get your degree. That's what I feel like the Celtics are going to look like next year with no Jason Tatum. Every single trade rumor that people publish in the world of professional basketball seems to indicate Boston is willing to move on from maybe even Jaylen Brown. If not Drew Holiday and Derek White, Kristaps Porzingis, they would move tomorrow if they could. So I don't view the Celtics as a serious contender next year. The Knicks don't have a coach, as we've talked about. They've tried to interview everyone else's coaches, and everyone just gives them the double bird, like, please stop calling us. But the Knicks on paper are going to be good. The Pacers have to get their flowers for this NBA Finals run. But outside of that, Orlando, to me, has now catapulted themselves into this level with Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, now Desmond Bane, and some other good pieces to have something to say about what the East is going to look like next year and then beyond, because Desmond Bane has only been in the league 5 years. Now, what to me is more interesting about this deal is what it says about the mentality of the Memphis Grizzlies and what it might say about the mentality of the Western Conference, right? So here's how this works. When a team is a juggernaut and when a team achieves historic success, the way Oklahoma City has, every roster constructor in pro basketball will look at that model, look at that blueprint, and say, how do we get some of that? It's not like any other business model where if something is successful, you want to copy, essentially the way they go about their business and their blueprint and their hiring practices and their best laid plans and their personnel, like whatever it is that's making it work. How do we get some of that? And I think this is what we're seeing as a result of what the Oklahoma City Thunder have built, who they are, and who they're going to be throughout the course of probably the next, I'll say, 3 to 4 years. Now, we live in a different NBA where the days of the long dynasties have probably been put behind us for now as a result of the punitive nature of the economic infrastructure of a team that's paying a lot of money, even if it's really good, for players that lead them to great things momentarily. But the longevity of dynasties are probably behind us unless you get an owner that is so rich he does not give a rip about literally losing hundreds of millions of dollars. And what we're about to see in Boston is probably the first real example of the punitive nature of the economic infrastructure of the NBA now, because this new ownership group has to write a check for $500 million just to have the team, just to have this roster. That's not even what they're paying their players. That is their luxury tax penalty for being a second apron team over the course of multiple years. That's why they have to make these decisions. And Oklahoma City at some point will have to make the same decisions. But the point is it's not coming anytime soon. That's why I'm going to use 3 to 4 years. Oklahoma City this year won 68 basketball games. Their net was plus 13. That is historic. They are a top 5 team on offense. They're a top 5 team on defense. They're about to win the NBA championship, in my opinion. And the bulk of their roster is between the ages of 21 and 27. Okay. So the only 2 exceptions there, and these are good players that they rely upon. Okay. So Kenrick Williams is 30 and Alex Caruso is 31. Okay. But besides that, Lou Dort, 26. Shea, of course, 26. Hartenstein is 27. Chet's 23. Isaiah Joe's 25. Cason Wallace is 21. Aaron Wiggins is 26. Jalen Williams is 24. And yes, at some point, if they win, other players are going to say, okay, it's time for me to get paid. But the point is that's not coming anytime soon. And it will come at some point. But I have to wonder if the Memphis Grizzlies simply just did their calculations on who Oklahoma City is and then juxtaposed OKC's roster to their own and said, look, we're just not close. We're not close to them. And so we do not want to pay Jaren Jackson Jr., who's a really good player, but he's going to be coming up on a contract extension. They've already paid Ja, but in Ja, you have an intoxicating talent and an absolute moron. And that's a tough thing to balance. And also, let me say this. I've heard a couple of people surmise that they think this means Memphis is going to move off Ja and they're going to move off Jaren Jackson Jr. I disagree with that. I don't think that's going to happen. Ja Morant at this point is under contract through 2028, and his final year is $44.8 million. Desmond Bane was actually the player who was under contract the longest. His contract runs through 2029 at $44.8. Jaren Jackson Jr. is about to enter a contract year. He is eligible for an extension, and I wouldn't be surprised if they extend him. Jaren Jackson Jr. next year is going to make $23.4 million. They got Brandon Clark, John Conchar, Zach Edey, who they drafted last year, and then a grip of young players, Scottie Pippen Jr. and others that people don't really know a ton about. But I don't think they're going to move off of Ja. I don't think they're going to move off of Jaren Jackson Jr. I think they're just going to kind of ride this thing out and then see what happens with Oklahoma City as this roster moves forward. So when you look at the books at OKC, and the reason I'm bringing this up, and we are going to land the plane. I know we're circling the airport a little bit, but it just leads me to wonder what other teams in the West are thinking about, and namely how the Jazz kind of view this through their prism. So we'll do this real quick before we catch a break. SGA, Shea is under contract through 2027. Now, as a result of winning MVP, the new contract he's going to get is going to be wild. It's going to be probably the richest contract in NBA history. They also have Hartenstein under contract through 2027, Dort under contract through 2027, Isaiah Joe through 28, Wiggins is signed through 29, Chet is on his rookie deal. That expires in 27. Caruso's signed actually through 29 as well. Kendrick Williams through 27. Kaysen's on his rookie deal. That's 28. And I could keep going. Essentially, this group will be together for at least 2 more years, playing at a very high level. And my guess is they're, of course, going to extend Shea. They're going to continue to extend some of these young players. And then Jalen will come off of his rookie contract in 28, and then they're going to have a decision to make. So this is a 3-year situation where, barring something wild like a really bad injury to Shea, knock on wood, Oklahoma City has told the rest of the league, we built this up brick by brick, and we're here, and we're not going anywhere for at least 3 years, and probably not after that as well, because Sam Presti has been so brilliant about his roster construction. But the secret sauce is, it's not just finding these great players now. What Oklahoma City is also positioned to do, because they have 13 future first-round picks, both their own and picks that are owed to them, as they do have to make tough economic decisions, they'll maintain a core of 2 to 3 guys, probably Shea, Jalen, and Chet, and then incrementally surround them with smart draft picks and players on rookie scales. And the reason you have to knock on these, you have to knock these draft picks out of the park is that essentially it's cheap labor, is what it is. It's really good young players that you don't have to pay very much. Guess how much Jalen Williams is making this year? $4.7 million for a number 2 option on a championship team. That is smart roster construction. And Jalen will get his, but not for at least 2 more years. So what Memphis did to me actually put my radars up a little bit more than I think most people have been talking about. This is an indication, in my opinion, that they've looked at OKC and said, we're not close. So we might as well turn one of these players into an asset, because we don't want to pay this roster an exorbitant amount of money when we don't feel like we're in the mix to win a championship. We'll see what this means for the Utah Jazz. And we'll get back to this coming up with Tom Haberstroh. Smitty will be good on this as well. The voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, stops by coming up in a bit. But on the other side, our first guest right out of the gates will be Kurt Schmidt to talk a little RSL on a Monday drive. Off and running. Good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. All right, it's game day on the station. Game 5 of the NBA Finals tonight. Paycom Center, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, where the Oklahoma City Thunder will host the Indiana Pacers. Series is deadlocked to 2 games apiece. We're going to say goodnight at 6 o'clock, and then we're going to send you coverage of that game, and we'll have the Stanley Cup Finals resuming tomorrow. We got Tom Haberstroh for some NBA, Smitty live in studio, voice of the Utes, Bill Riley. But we'll start things off on a Monday afternoon talking a little soccer as RSL gets a much-needed win over the weekend, 2-0 over DC United, and Kurt Schmidt, Chief Roster Constructor, on the program on a Monday. Kurt, happy Monday, sir. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, bud. Thanks for the time. So I don't know what adjective you would like to use. Relieved, excited. I don't know. You tell me. What sort of emotion or whatever did that win on Saturday give you guys after going 7 matches without a dub?
How about hungry?
There we go.
It's one of those where it's like, hey, that was necessary, and now we got to focus on the next one.
For sure. And one of the players you acquired during the primary transfer window, Johnny Russell, opened his bank account. Soccer terms kid, no big deal. So how pleased were you in I believe that was his first start, to see Johnny find the back of the net?
No, it's fantastic, and obviously when players score goals, it gives them confidence and helps them repeat that performance and even improve. So, for Johnny to get that goal in his first start is huge for the team, because obviously it helps us win the game, but it's huge for him as well.
Tell me about the process, Kurt, of bringing him along. So for our listeners, Johnny is a long-time, not just MLS vet, but he's played all over the world, and the goal he scored on Saturday was his 61st goal in Major League Soccer. So he's had a long career. He was with Sporting KC. A lot of people thought he was going to retire, did not have a preseason. So you signed him, and I would imagine it took a minute for him to get in form and fit. So tell us about this process, and what sort of light can you shed on it?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's still rolling into it. I mean, he's a disciplined professional, and he was certainly keeping himself ready and fit and working out while he was looking for his next club. But that's different than obviously playing at a high level every day, training day in, day out, and having that match fitness and that match sharpness. So he's definitely starting to get his legs under him in that respect. I mean, the match fitness still isn't quite there. Obviously, he came out at the half, and building him up is going to help us a lot. But his sharpness is getting back to where it needs to be, and saw that with the quality on his finish.
Tell me about, because it was interesting to listen to Johnny post-game, where he talked about how grateful he was for this opportunity, and even kind of Kurt pontificated on the possibility of walking away. Wasn't sure if he was going to get another team. Said he's here to score goals, create goals, and also help some of these younger players. So throughout the course of your conversations with Johnny during the primary transfer window, what sort of kind of details did you guys share back and forth, and what essentially was your ask of him before bringing him into the club?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, the conversations with him were about, definitely extending his career, but also what he could bring to our group. And we have a very young team. Before Johnny came in, Rafa was the only player we had over 30 essentially on the roster. So one of the things that we talked to him about was just coming in and being a bit of a leader and a mentor and an experienced guy within the group, just to help the group through some things that he'd seen before, and some of the younger guys, despite their talents or their quality in that moment, just haven't seen. So I think that's something that manifested right away from day one, is how he integrated with the group, and his ability to, just to talk to players on the field. Pablo says this all the time, but to have, your teammate kind of make a point to you is sometimes a little bit different than a coach, right? Especially when a veteran player puts his arm around you and is like, hey, next time, do it like this, not like that, or next time play me here and not there. It rings a little more true for those guys. And so that little bit of experience in the group has been very helpful. And then obviously, it's just about setting expectations for him and his performance. And he's a high level player. He wants to, play all the time. He wants to score goals every game. He wants to do all those things. He's very hungry. And it's just about setting his expectations of, hey, you've been out for a bit. Like, let's get you fit. Let's get you into it. And when you're ready, you'll go.
I had a chance when I was with the club on the road in San Diego. I had a chance to meet him and talk to him, and his intensity really just shines through. And that's always interesting And it is player by player. I can remember the first time I met Will Johnson. I thought he was going to shank me with a knife. I'm like, chill out, dude. It's okay. And Johnny kind of has that same intensity just as a person when you just kind of meet him and talk to him. I wonder what sort of expectation you guys have moving forward now that he is fit and he has started and he has scored a goal. I mean, it's safe to say that he's a piece, but do you think we're going to see him in starting 11s? And what sort of expectations do you have for him now that we've seen what he can do when he's fit and Pablo gives him the start?
Honestly, I mean, I don't want to be in the business right now of saying this guy will play every game, that guy, you know, is going to be a sub or any of that stuff, because the reality is where we're at, you know, and we're not, you know, we're not clueless. We know where we're at in the season, and there's no consideration other than form and performance on the day. And, you know, for Pablo, he's just got to make those decisions on the day. If it's Johnny, it's Johnny. If it's Dom, if it's Gozo, if it's Aiden Hazarkani or whoever it could be in that wide midfield spot, you know, it's got to be who's going to put in the best performance on the day. So when that's Johnny, you know, he obviously brings something different than some of the other guys, you know, being left-footed, having a little more experience and quality in the box. You know, he's a little more of a goal scorer than kind of the rest of the options out there. So he adds a little bit different, which, you know, is a fantastic change of pace, whether that's from the start or it's off the bench later in the game.
Okay, so I want to pan back here and talk about the club from kind of a 30,000-foot view as we're sitting here, you know, more or less past midway. And, you know, it seems like every time I have Pablo on, and it's been more or less weekly, unless, you know, there are travel issues, he often talks about how there have been moments in every game that he's very pleased with. And ultimately, this can be a really, really cruel sport where you get caught with a counter or there's a deflection and somebody scores a dumb goal or you get a red card or a PK or whatever. So 18 games played, 5-10-3, 18 points. As you said, you guys know where you're at in the standings. Pablo kind of laid the math on us last week of what you need to do to make the postseason. But what I wanted to get from you is, as you're watching your club, what do you feel like you can say that you're very good at? And what do you feel like you can say that you very much need to improve on with this club? I'm not talking about additions. I'm talking about what you see with the group you have.
Another good question, Spence. I think we've been pretty good in our ball progression, our build-up, most games this year, with maybe a few exceptions. And so some of that piece of our identity that we established last year has carried through. And, you know, I think Rafa's been a huge help. You know, obviously he's a goalkeeper, so defense first, but he's added a lot of calmness and composure to our build-out process. So I think we've seen good build-out and ball progression from back to middle, and I think from middle to front, middle to final third, I think it's been a little more hit or miss. I think it's been good, but I think we need to be a little more consistent, where I think last year we needed fewer chances to score goals, to be quite honest. And this year we need some more. We need, you know, we're volume finishers, you know, like, again, you saw it in this game this weekend. Gozo's a young guy. He's working, he's getting chances, and, you know, he needs 2 or 3 good chances and he got his goal, but we need to keep giving him those chances to make sure he gets his goals. And, you know, Willie's the same. Ari's going to be the same. You know, all those guys up top that we put in there, they need chances to score. So I think we've been creating those chances. We've been getting the ball in good spots. Our movement in the box sometimes isn't ideal. Our finishing obviously needs to improve with this group. But yeah, I think those things are still there for us to improve upon. But I think we've put together some really good games, you know, back to middle, and then, you know, middle to final third is where, you know, I think it just needs to improve a bit. And I think we focused on that in the last few weeks. And there's been some games, you know, when we started the Vancouver game, I thought it was, you know, it was obviously really good early in the game. And then the defense wasn't able to sustain it against a really good team that was playing with a lot of confidence. So, yeah, but I think those aspects on the ball are where we're looking right now.
8 games played, 6 starts, 2 subs, 1 goal. For Willie so far. Willie Agata, your other addition during the primary transfer window. I'm going to ask you the same thing about Willie that I asked you about your club, because you referenced movement off the ball in the box. And you can see, I mean, obviously he is a striker that has played significant time in MLS, and he has goals in him that we've seen. And it's probably more experience as if you juxtapose him to Ari, but his movement stands out to me. But we have not seen a ton of goals so far. So what have you liked from Willie in his 8 games played, and what are you hoping to see moving forward?
Yeah, I think Willie is, and sometimes it's hard to catch, but he is an incredibly strong player, and so his hold of play can be a strength of his. I don't think it, it's not always there, right? Which is some consistency because even though he's a little more experienced than Ari, he's still relatively on the younger side. So, but he's someone who can hold the ball up for us, and when he plays simple and gets back on the highest line, that can be very effective. I think this last week he got away from that a little bit, and it was a little too many touches getting caught in possession in those moments. But when he does play 1 and 2 touch, he can hold the defender off, and he can keep possession for us and get back on the highest line, which just gives us more time to get our team forward and get our numbers into the final third and hopefully into the box when the chance does come. And I think he's also someone that, he gets his chances. And I think there are specific moments when, again, his movement, any player's movement can improve in the box, but he finds a way, whether it's instinct or, whatever it might be, he finds a way to get chances in front of goal each game. But again, he's, I think like Gozo, like I mentioned with Gozo, I think he's going to be a volume finisher, and he's not a guy that can stand around for the whole game, and we'll give him a chance and he'll score a goal. I think he's got to be engaged in the entire game. We got to keep feeding him chances, getting him the ball in the final third, and he'll get his goals.
So you referenced Gozo, and maybe I buried the lead, but I wanted to start with Johnny because it was his first goal. But you do have a second leading scorer now, officially, with Gozo tallying his second. And I don't know, Kurt, maybe it was 3 weeks ago, a month ago when you hopped on the show, when I said to you, okay, I feel like you've got something with this young kid. And we'll get to Diego and his experience with the Gold Cup in a minute. But just for our listeners' sake, what sort of insight can you shed about his growth and the process, what you're seeing so far that you like, and what he needs to do to keep it going?
So Gozo, like I think any successful young player, the real differentiator is in his head, and his mentality, his work rate, his work ethic, his ability to refocus is maybe a word that I would use, where it's like, hey, something happens to distract him or take him out of his game, and he's able to refocus back in on the game and get back to it is really, really good. And his adaptability from level to level has been really, really good. And so what's gotten him these opportunities is that aspect, his mentality, continuing to come back, continuing to try the next one. He's, like I said, he had a couple chances early, didn't score them, had another chance, put it away, right? And so his ability to kind of set those prior instances aside and just take the next one as it is and do his best with that opportunity is really elite from that standpoint. And his ability to do that is what's gonna serve him the most well as he goes and progresses through the career. Because as long as he has those things in his head, he's going to do the extra work. The coaches will work with him. He's going to get the reps and the experience, and he sees these situations more, and he's going to learn from those situations. And all of that will come along with it. And his ability to just continue to work and go and try the next one and the next one and the next one is what's relentless, I guess is a word you can use, is what's going to keep him developing and becoming a better and better player for us.
Help me understand, because he's not, I don't think he's a 9, right? But he can clearly finish with a couple of goals. When it's fully baked, when Gozo is completely developed, what sort of position / role do you think will allow him to magnify his talents the best?
Yeah, he's played both. I obviously when he was, when he was with the U15s, which was kind of crazy to say or think about, but when he was with U15s, he was a right winger. He played up top as well, and he sort of served his time in both roles as he's moved his way through the pipeline. So he's certainly done both for us, and he can do it. I mean, he's playing probably more of like a 9.5 or a second striker role right now, where he's looking to stretch the defense and get in behind from a little bit of a deeper starting position. But if you look at us when we build right now, it's almost a 2-striker setup with an attacking midfielder coming underneath. That was maybe Luna before he left, and the other night it was Diogo coming in underneath and getting on the ball. So I think he gives us a bit of a different look than we had last year or even earlier this year, where in possession we were sort of 2 attacking midfielders behind 1 striker. Now it's almost one attacking midfielder behind 2 strikers when we're trying to attack.
So you referenced Diogo. He's credited with the assist on Johnny's goal. That was kind of an individual effort from Johnny, but nonetheless, he gets the credit. And as I talked to you about prior to Diego leaving, it felt like this could be an opportunity for Diogo maybe to shut some people up and fill up or live up to expectations. We all know he's the only designated player on the roster technically. You guys were pretty dominant on Saturday, and he was intertwined in most of the attacking plays that led to anything substantial. Give me an update on how he's doing and his progress and what you're hoping to see from him as Diego's with the U.S. men's national team.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think he's putting his head down. He's working hard, and he knows there's responsibility that he needs to take with Diego out. And I think he did a good job of taking that on Saturday. And the ball he played to Johnny for his goal was a phenomenal through ball. But even more than that, it's his ability to maintain possession under pressure in the middle of the field, and then spin out with some good technique and find that ball. And I think he finds those balls maybe more than we realize, just because we have had some trouble finishing them. But when you look at some of the more advanced metrics, I think it shows that he had a pretty good game on the day. So, I think if he comes at it with that mentality and brings that level of work and quality to the game, because he has quality, I think it's going to be real interesting as we get in these next couple games.
We've talked about the depth you have centrally with the midfield. And, of course, I have a two-part question here because Emeka is unavailable for now. So I'm wondering what the update is for Emeka. And then how nice is it? And certainly Nelson is part of this equation too. But I don't know, man. Like for me, a couple of years ago, before Ruiz hurt both knees, he was one of the better players on the entire team on a number of different levels, not just centrally, but he would take corners. He would take free kicks. And it's hard to expect him to look the same after two devastating injuries. So update on Emeka, and then tell me what you're seeing when Pablo Ruiz steps in and what you like and maybe what you're hoping he can continue to try and find after those devastating injuries.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. Pablo and Nelson is a much different look than Emeka and Ojeda. I think Emeka and Ojeda do a phenomenal job of chewing up ground and recovering balls, recovering second balls, and then keeping the game ticking over and playing the next pass. I think, Pablo, his game is a little bit different, right? Because he can close guys down defensively and recover balls, but that's not really the main part of his game. What he really brings to the team is quality in our buildup, in our progression, and especially in our ability to open the game and change the point of attack. He does a great job with that. And Nelson is, even though he's a younger player, but he's a good balance of the two. His physical gifts are fantastic. He covers so much ground so quickly. He's so athletic, but he also has the ability to hit that diagonal, as Pablo does. So those types of balls really open the game for us and allow us to get behind the defense a little bit quicker, maybe than otherwise when we're not able to hit that ball.
So are we getting close with Emeka, or is it a situation where he's going to need some time?
Look, he needs time because it's certainly something that, if we worsen it, the prognosis becomes, much worse. So, we want to make sure we take care with it and make sure we get him back when he's ready to get back.
10-4. All right. Before I set you loose, I thought Diego was the best player on the pitch yesterday. He has the assist after a brilliant steal where he just was able to read the play. And then probably should have had the goal, but yes, it deflects off his teammates. So technically, Diego ends with 2 assists and a 5-0 win for the U.S. men's national team over Trinidad and Tobago, after losing 5 straight matches. Of course, a lot of noise because we're 1 year away from the World Cup. So give me your thoughts as you've watched Diego perform with the U.S. men's national team, what you hope he's able to learn and do with them and bring back to you when the Gold Cup is finished.
Yeah, he's been playing really well for them. I think every time he's gotten the chance, and credit to him, grabbing those opportunities is massive. And I think what he's brought to that group is more than his individual quality, is a team first mentality. And I think he obviously has those moments, reading that back pass, picking it up. I know they gave him an assist for that, but I really think that probably should have been his goal. But that play was fantastic. Even the I think it was the first goal. His activity and movement, I think, is what creates a little bit of space in the defense for the goal scorer Tillman to finish his chance and to find a little more space when he receives the ball. So again, I think he's making that team tick a little bit right now, which is great for him. And I hope it keeps happening. And I'm sure, but I also hope the coaching staff sees it as well as I do, or certainly it seems like the majority of the fans do.
All right, my guy, I appreciate the time today. Congrats on the 3 over the weekend. Let's keep it rolling, okay?
All right, will do.
All right, Kurt Schmidt, Chief Roster Constructor for Real Salt Lake. RSL hits the road coming up on the 28th. Jeez, another week off. Only 2 matches all month. They're going to be at Children's Mercy Park in Kansas City on the 28th to take on Sporting KC, who was the team that had both Willie Agata and Johnny Russell, so that'll be interesting. And then they're back at home for 2 straight games against St. Louis and Houston before hitting the road at Providence Park to take on Portland. As we talked about with Pablo last week, this is a team badly in need of getting all 3 points pretty much every time they're at home, hoping to steal some on the road, and then keep that ship afloat while Diego Luna is with the U.S. men's national team. RSL.com for single-game tickets. Support our local soccer club. We'll catch a quick break. Coming up on the other side, Tom Haberstroh stops by. We'll give you a preview of tonight's Game 5 of the NBA Finals. We'll review Game 4. Desmond Bain to the Magic, NBA Draft, Jazz offseason. Busy with Tommy coming up on the other side. On The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. You think you're setting a good example for the kids in the car driving around town in the community by playing a song that's clearly about weed?
This is about a pretty woman named Mary Jane.
Oh, okay, and it's just the boy's magic dragon, right?
No.
Puff's just the boy's magic dragon.
In fact, I know a Mary Jane.
Are you a pothead fucker?
That's a great movie.
Do you pass on grass? Is that what it is?
No, I know a living human named Mary Jane.
All
So
right, okay.
maybe
Does Tom Petty?
you're just these are accusatory.
Okay, let me look it up during the break. Nonetheless, it's a great song, Tom Petty. All right, Smitty live in studio coming up in just a bit for an entire hour. Voice of the Utes, Bill Riley stops by, but big game tonight, Game 5 NBA Finals. Got a blockbuster trade to talk about. Tom Haberstroh, Monday afternoon. Tommy, happy Monday, buddy. How we doing?
Doing great, Spence. How you guys doing?
I'm good. So tell me, what's your read on the mentality of the Memphis Grizzlies as a result of what they just decided to do with Desmond Bane and the Orlando Magic? What do you think it means for the Memphis side?
Yeah, it means they really hoped they could switch to the Eastern Conference because really that's what this is about.
Yeah.
It's the Memphis Grizzlies looked at the Western Conference field and said, we can't compete at the highest levels. And Zach Kleiman, the GM of the Memphis Grizzlies, said this a couple weeks ago when they got eliminated from the playoffs by the Oklahoma City Thunder. And he's like, you know what? You can look at this and just say, like, we're close, but we're definitely not. And when you are looking at the juggernauts of the Western Conference and Oklahoma City and Denver, Jokic, you're looking at LeBron and Luka. You're looking at Golden State, Houston potentially adding a big-time veteran to help their contention push. Memphis is just so far away right now. And if you're in the Eastern Conference, if Memphis geographically was in the right conference, you could see them holding on to Desmond Bane and not only that, adding and trying to win the East. And on the Orlando side, that's exactly what they're trying to do, is they're trying to win the East because they saw Indiana do this very thing, which is they made an incredible run, and now they're 2 wins away from winning a championship. And so for Memphis, it really is this kind of clerical error, the fact that they were the team from Vancouver, that they're in the Western Conference despite being in Tennessee. And that has long-term effects, is that they're constantly fighting uphill in a Western Conference that is way better than the Eastern Conference. And they've got this rookie, Jalen Wells, that they really believe in. And if you're going to look at 5 first-round picks coming from this Orlando team, one of which could be the Phoenix pick next year in 2026, they were looking at the situation and saying, this is too good of an offer we cannot refuse. So in a very Godfather way, this was an offer they could not refuse on a player that hasn't been an all-star. But, you know, when you're a small market team, you have to make tough choices. And as much as they want to say that they're right there in the thick of it, I think the first-round exit and the uncertain future of Ja Morant and just how available he can be, I think Memphis decided, look, let's take these picks and take another big swing down the road. But right now, this is quite a haul for a guy who is just a tier below the all-star level.
So a lot of people, Tom, I know you know this, have surmised this means Memphis is very much open for business. And maybe they put Ja on the table. Maybe they put Jaren Jackson Jr. on the table. I don't know that I read it that way. Jaren Jackson Jr., is really good. He is entering a contract year, so he's eligible for an extension. $23.4 million next year. Ja's signed through 28. I don't know what kind of market there is for Ja. I mean, his talent is intoxicating. Nobody denies that, but the off-court stuff just makes it hard to commit. But do you read it that way, that as a result of moving on from Desmond Bane, they might just break this whole thing down and build it back up from the studs?
Yeah, I think they're going to keep those two and build around them. You know, for a small market team, Ja Morant represents so much more, face of the franchise, for better or for worse. And Jaren Jackson Jr. is up for that extension, like you said, and this deal does save them some money to throw more at Jaren Jackson Jr. You know, with the apron and the tax and the hard cap, all of this stuff, they had a little bit of wiggle room to extend Jaren Jackson Jr. at the full max level. And this Desmond Bane deal does free up a little bit more cap space to do that. Look, this is tough. You know, this is tough. If you're a fan of the Grizzlies, I think Utah fans can really sympathize with this, with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. It's like, if you're the margin for error for these teams, these small market teams in the Western Conference, is so thin, which is why it's so remarkable to see what OKC has done. And they're kind of like in the second inning, it seems, of what seems to be the parts of a dynasty. It really is amazing to see that the Utah Jazz were able to make that run with Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley. But as what we're seeing with the Memphis Grizzlies, even having those two young studs on your team, Jaren Jackson Jr. and John Morant, does not guarantee you anything. And as we saw with that Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell core, they probably are going to try to take a couple more swings at the apple in the next 2-3 years. John Morant is on the books for another 3 seasons. I think maybe we'll see that in these next 2-3 years, with Zach Edey out for a substantial amount of time next season with his ankle surgery. I think this could be kind of like a gap year for them, is that they're going to try to continue to contend for a playoff position. But I think they're going to try to reload with these draft picks and take another swing probably a year down the road.
If they decided to put Ja out there, if they decided to put Ja Morant on the table, it's a tough one, Tom, because when he's right, he's as exciting as any player individually. I still maintain that. He is box office. And the production certainly is there. I do think if you have Ja Morant on your team, there's a little Iverson element where you got to play a certain way. And I don't know that that's good or bad. It just is. But what sort of market would be out there if they decided to put Ja on the table?
Well, what's interesting is his salary is very close to Trae Young, and they're kind of having identity issues too there in Atlanta. So I wonder if Ja Morant ever got onto the table, whether both franchises would just say, like, look, let's just swap point guards and see where we're at. And it's funny because that's kind of what the Atlanta Hawks did on draft night with Luka Doncic, where they had the opportunity to draft Luka Doncic and they traded out and took Trae Young. And I think you could see something similar with Ja Morant if there is a market for a point guard who's as unreliable from not just off-court stuff, but injury-wise, too. This guy has not been very healthy the last few years, even the off-court antics aside. I could see a team like Charlotte, Atlanta, really think about, if we're going to make a splash, is Ja Morant our guy? Toronto is another name I think about, is trying to get into that conversation of taking someone else's star player, disgruntled or, depreciated in value star player. I think you can talk yourself into it. But, this is, like you said, Ja Morant is a big risk-reward move, because the reward is you've got an all-NBA talented point guard, but doesn't have a reliable jump shot. And if you squint, you might see like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander dynamic downhill driver. But if he doesn't have the same legs and bounce as he used to, and he doesn't have that defensive value, that effort that you get from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, it's going to be tough to convince someone to take his long-term contract, no matter how much star power he has. It would take a team like Charlotte, Washington, Atlanta, Chicago, these teams that are kind of in the bottom of the East, and look at like, hey, if they're selling off those stars in the Western Conference because it's just so hard to compete, we'll take a guy like that. So I think that the Southeast Division, basically for the Eastern Conference, I think could all think about whether Ja Morant is in the right situation for them.
All right, so moving back to the Orlando takeaway here, because you used the term gap year earlier, very much feels like that's what's going to happen in Boston with Jason Tatum on the sideline, and reports on a daily basis that they're willing to deal whoever, including Jaylen Brown. The Cavs on paper still have a really talented team. All those guys are back next year, and ultimately they're going to have something to say about it. I don't know if the Knicks have contacted you about their head coaching job, but there's certainly a lot to like about the roster. We don't know who's going to coach them. So just generally speaking, you can throw of course, the Pacers deserve their flowers. They're still playing basketball. And we'll see what happens with Giannis in Milwaukee. Detroit has some things about them to like as a young, evolving team. But generally speaking, what does this mean for Orlando as far as where they're at on the pecking order in the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, I mean, this Orlando team just added one of the best three-point shooters, swing guys, two-way players in the league. And he's not someone who's going to be an all-star guaranteed, but he's not a bona fide all-star, but he's right on that tier below like Mikal Bridges, and he got 5 first-round picks last year. So I think the Magic, last season were the 5th seed, like two years ago. I mean, this past season they were the 7th seed, about a 500 team. Next year with Desmond Bane, if you get that 3-point shooting that he does, the high volume 40% 3-point shooting, it's going to open up a lot for those drivers and Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero. I think they could get into that top 4. Like you said, Cleveland's going to be at the top there. Indiana, Detroit, the Knicks will be up there, but Orlando's going to try to take one of those top 4 spots. I don't think that they're a guarantee to make the Eastern Conference Finals with this move. It's a hefty price, but if you're Orlando and you need 3-point shooting and you're putting a premium on it, this is the price tag. I think that they were also, rumored to be in Anthony Simons talks, where it's like that guy is also an elite 3-point shooter that could really help them. But that price tag, KCP, the Cole Anthony, and the 5 picks, that's a lot. And I do think that that's worth, Desmond Bane, maybe a little bit of an overpay. But as we're seeing with Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis with the Celtics, and this year with Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein, if you have your guy that you think is a missing piece to a title contention, go get him. Go get him. And we're seeing that on both of these these finalist teams. They both identified players that they really thought were the missing piece, Pascal Siakam for Indiana, and that vaulted them into the NBA Finals. And so Orlando just feels like, with Jason Tatum and the Damian Lillard Achilles injuries, they feel like they're a piece away from contending for the East. I think they're on the outside of that conversation right now with Cleveland and with the New York Knicks and the Indiana Pacers, but they could certainly try to snag that number 4 slot.
So I want to go back to something you referenced, because I agree with you that this does indicate that the Memphis Grizzlies did their calculation on their own situation, and mainly Oklahoma City, whose roster is so young. And OKC at some point will have some financial decisions to make, but they're so rich with draft capital that even if they have to move off a piece here or there, if they just want to build around Shea, Chet, and Jalen, they can do that while continuously adding pieces through the draft because Sam's so good at that. Do you think that's a microcosm of the mentality of other front offices in the Western Conference, just doing their calculation on OKC and saying, okay, we've got to wait it out a bit because we're not close to where they're at?
Yeah, we didn't even talk about the San Antonio Spurs.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly, yeah. Or Dallas, right?
Like,
maybe the Mavs with Cooper.
Maybe the Mavs, right? We didn't even mention Minnesota earlier. The Clippers. I mean, look at that. I mean, San Antonio with Wemby, with De'Aaron Fox, and I don't know if you want to talk about this, but on the Kevin O'Connor show, the KOC show this week, we were talking about if Utah moves up or tries to move up, and if they really believe that Dylan Harper is their guy, the Spurs could absolutely ask for Lauri Markkanen and say, like, look, if you're gonna want to move up from 5 to 2, it's gonna cost you Markkanen. I don't know if Utah would do that trade, but just for the hypothetical, if the Spurs add Lowry and they get De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, and whomever they get at number 5, that team's loaded. That starting lineup is loaded. And so, the Spurs could be in that mix for a home court advantage in the Western Conference first round. And so for a lot of these teams in the middle, Sacramento, Memphis, Phoenix, you're seeing Phoenix try to offload Kevin Durant. Why would they do that? Well, they missed the play-in this year. That's how good the Western Conference group is. And so I think those teams are going to be looking at the situation and saying, let's try to figure out a way to land a franchise piece. Because if Desmond Bane isn't that guy, then you know what? Let's take another bite at the apple in a couple years when Oklahoma City probably will have to have some tough decision-making around their core.
Okay, moving over to the Jazz angle here. Brian Windhorst, I don't know what show it was, but there was a video going around where he said he's told the Jazz are going to try to get involved here and actually not take a step backwards and maybe try to add some pieces to take a couple steps forward. I think that's the wrong approach with that top 8 protected pick that goes to, you guessed it, Oklahoma City, if the Jazz are out of the top 8. But, the reports out there, and there are several, are that the Jazz are very much open for business, taking calls on everybody, including Lauri Markkanen. So when you look, player rankings are arbitrary and sometimes make me roll my eyes, but it is what it is. The Ringer player rankings has Desmond Bane at 47, which feels low, to be honest, and Lauri Markkanen at 53. So maybe generally speaking, we can agree that they're kind of in the same area. Although I think maybe depending on what your need is, you'd look at one over the other. But if the Jazz are going to move on from Lauri based off of what Memphis just received for a player that we can say is kind of in that cul-de-sac, what sort of return can we expect if they make that decision?
Well, yeah, I think multiple first-round picks. You also have to figure the fact that in that scenario that I mentioned, you're getting a guaranteed number 2 pick, whereas in the Orlando case, these picks are not guaranteed to be even lottery picks, or top 10 picks. And so if you're the Utah Jazz, that matters. Is like if you're going to move off of Lauri Markkanen, you're going to want at least 3 first-round picks or a guaranteed top 5 pick, something like that. It's so hard to pin down, Spence, because as someone who covers this nationally, the currency of a player like Markkanen, it's really hard to pin down when you got guys like Nico Harrison just throwing this for a total loop. The wrench that they threw into this whole thing by having Luka Doncic, who's way more valuable than Desmond Bane, go for 1 first-round pick and Anthony Davis and Max Christie. It's really hard to peg. If you just find one GM, you can get a steal and get a haul for Lauri Markkanen. That's what that deal tells me, is that we can talk in these generalities about what Lauri Markkanen will get you. But Mikal Bridges is another comp for Markkanen where it's like you can get a haul of first-round picks. But in the case of Utah, I almost think that getting like guaranteed lottery picks rather than just like kicking one down the road might be even more valuable at this point. And so I don't know what you think, Spence. If the Spurs called Austin Ainge and the front office and said, look, we will move down to 5. You guys can jump to 2 if you really want Dylan Harper to be the point guard of the future. But it's going to cost you Markkanen. I think you're going to, if you're Utah, you ask for more than that. And I know your listeners will probably say, yeah, absolutely. But I proposed this to KOC this week, and he said, if I'm Utah, I'm good. As long as I get Dylan Harper, I'm good. I want that. It is such a big jump to getting number 2 in this draft that it is worth Markkanen in a trade. I said, man, if I am the Utah Jazz, I want 14. I want Spurs number 14 pick as well. So in the deal, it would be Markkanen. It would be the number 5 for the number 2 pick, the number 14 pick from the Spurs, and then like Harrison Barnes and Keldon Johnson as salary filler. If I'm Utah, I think about that deal to get off of Lauri Markkanen and just get that number 2 pick. But it really depends how much you believe in Dylan Harper as a franchise cornerstone. But there are some people out there that think he has a lot of the makings of a James Harden, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander type. If you're Will Hardy, if you're Danny Ainge and Austin Ainge, and you're looking at this and trying to find your point guard of the future, how much do you believe that Dylan Harper is a vastly bigger upgrade than what you have now?
Well said. And, it leads us into the space of what Windhorst had to say about the Jazz intention. And who knows? But a deal like that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, in my opinion, Tom, priority 1 next year has to be holding on to that asset. You cannot win 37 games and fall to 9 or 10. Now, there's no guarantee. We saw it this year in the lottery. I get that. And so maybe there's a paradigm shift where we are going to be serious about competing and put our best foot forward about actually trying to win. But if we operate off, and Windhorst is a very plugged-in guy. I'm not trying to knock on him at all. But if we say that his assertion is actually the mentality of the Jazz front office, and they do want to go all in on taking legitimate steps forward, while your plan to me is the right one, to go young and maybe grab a Dylan Harper, what would the opposite look like with all these players available? Like, how could they add to this group to take a couple of legitimate steps forward and bring in some veteran players that are good, know how to win, and want to come in here and do just that? I don't know that I see any avenue.
Boston might be moving off of Kristaps Porzingis or Drew Holiday, right? There's those pieces if you really want to go in now, but that requires, stomaching Drew Holiday and the fact that he's someone who's going to win right now, but you have to make sure that is like 3 dominoes down. Is that like you're not going to just take Drew Holiday at 35 years old without 2 other players coming in there and ramping up. Let's just say for throwing around some names here, let's just say that you got Drew Holiday potentially in a salary switch out where you're like, maybe you move John Collins off and you try to bring in Drew Holiday to win right now. You talk to New Orleans about their pieces and say, if you're really serious about Trey Murphy III, let's talk. He's a really good Desmond Bane type, 2 years younger than Desmond Bane, but I could see him being a star in another role. And then you just try to figure out, are you able to get some more depth at the center position, whether it's Clint Capella, whether it's someone who can really help Walker Kessler not have to play 35 minutes. But even as I'm talking myself through this experiment, this exercise, it's going to be a tough sell. They were not just bad. 17 wins bad last year. And so if they're going to go for it, I can't tell you how rare it is. Detroit, what they did this season, it is not replicable. That whole jump from Detroit is insane. And so I know it was possible. They showed the blueprint to do that. But look, you look at Utah's roster, who's their Cade Cunningham? They don't have it right now.
No, they don't.
And so that's delusional to think that you can ramp up and be like a really solid playoff team after being a 17-win team. I think Brian's spot on. I think there are intentions to add to this team, and maybe this front office wants to add to this team to be a playoff contender. But I think also what's true is that they might go to market and say, you know what, those guys are not available at the price that we can afford. And maybe they go into the market with one idea and they come out with another.
All right, we'll end with a thought on tonight and the NBA Finals overall. It's really been cool because all 4 games have been different, right? And we've seen a chess match, we've seen adjustments, we've seen back and forth. Dagnall went deeper into his bench. He gave Shea more rest. Jalen was initiating the offense. 0 assists. Which you look at it, if you didn't watch the game, you'd be like, "What's up?" Well, that wasn't what they asked of him, and it allowed SGA to stay fresh, and he closed out the way that he can close out. Fascinated to get your take on these adjustments and what you think happens tonight, Tom, before I set you loose.
Yeah, I think OKC wins. I picked OKC in 5, and so I feel like they gave away game 1, and we could be looking at a closeout game here if that didn't happen. I think OKC is the vastly better team, but Indiana plays so hard. This is the most competitive NBA Finals since, I would say, 2016. It's just insane how hard these teams play. They play the full 94 feet, and they cover so much ground. They're averaging 3 more miles traveled per game than we saw last year between Boston and Dallas. Each team is covering 3 more miles of ground in 48 minutes than last year's finals team. It's 6 more miles are being covered by these players. They're just all over the place, zooming around the floor, playing at such high speeds, up tempo, different actions. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, they figured out a way to get him off the ball with Jalen Williams that was really smart, and it also preserved him for that final stretch. I talked about it on TomTheFinder.com, and the fact that Scott Foster being on the game really benefited them because he calls so many fouls out there that it lengthens the game and actually builds in rest time. And I think they're going to try to do that again, is try to figure out how we can keep up with this young Indiana Pacers team that really throws you through a loop with how fast they play. It's not 7 seconds or less, it's 5 seconds or less. They're getting past half court in like 2 seconds repeatedly. And that's the New York Knicks couldn't keep up, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Cavs couldn't keep up. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, by playing off the ball, it is wonderful to have Jalen Williams on your team, Chet Holmgren and Kason Wallace, guys who can bring the ball up the floor. They're just so good on both ends. I expect OKC to win tonight, and I would suspect them closing out in Game 6. It's been an amazing series. I do not want it to end in 6 because it's been such great basketball. But this OKC team is just on another level, and I think they found something in Game 4.
Where can people go get your work, Tommy?
Yahoo Sports, the KOC Show, and The Big Number, both podcasts every week on Yahoo Sports, as well as TomTheFinder.com and Basketball Illuminati podcast, and right here every week on Mondays.
Thank you, my friend. Enjoy the game tonight. We'll chat soon, okay?
You got it, Spence.
All right, the great Tom Haberstroh. Some really good stuff in there about his conversation with the KOC about the Jazz potential to maybe move up to 2. And we'll get back to it. Well, coming up on the other side, I'll get Smitty's take on that. We'll do some NBA Finals. We'll do some Jazz. We'll do some draft. Bill Riley, Voice of the Utes, about an hour from right now. Moving to the 5 o'clock hour of the program. Then we'll say goodnight at 6 o'clock in time for the NBA Finals. Tom stops by today, courtesy of our friends at Advanced Window Products, where right now you can get $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. It's a great local Salt Lake company operated by a friend of the program, Nate Orchard, mayor of Sac Lake City, his buddy Jake Weber. They're just awesome people. Come from a great family who's been running Advanced Window Products for a number of years. So if it's the time for you, because the weather's about to get warm, it's been warm now for a couple of weeks. Is your house super hot? Are you jacking up the air conditioning? Well, you're wasting money. And potentially, if you need to wait until the fall, maybe you're going to sell a house or whatever it is, or you're going to wait till the winter before the house gets cold. If you need windows now, or you will need windows over the next couple of months, if you call today, you lock in the savings regardless of when the process happens. So $2,500 off when you purchase 10 windows or more at Advanced Window Products by calling 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, or online at advancedwindows.com. All right, Smitty, live in studio, coming up on the other side of a Monday edition of The Drive right here on ESPN 700. Are you trying to make Bill jealous? You know, we do have Bill on the show today. We can't bring this back twice.
I think Smitty's trying to make Bill jealous.
Oh, okay.
I think
There we
it's
go. It's a great song.
situation here.
It's a great song. Bill Riley is going to stop by in 1 hour from now, Voice of the Utes. But Richard Smith is live in studio for an entire hour on a jam-packed Monday afternoon. Smitty, happy Monday, sir. How are you?
Hey, man, Spence, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. There's so many things that I want to talk to you about. Let's start with a quick, J.J. Spawn, oh, my gosh moment, because you and I are both golf fans. And it's interesting watching the best players in the world just have no answers for the problems that a course like Oakmont presents. The best players in the world, some of them missed the cut. Most all of them fell apart, and JJ teetered too, bogeying 5 of 6, and I wrote him off. I'm like, okay, he's not ready for this moment. Sam Burns probably feels hard done because of the ruling. I mean, water was everywhere. Adam Scott falls apart, and after the weather break, JJ Spawn rolls back into the thing and wins it with a 60-footer on 18. I mean, a life-changing moment. It's my favorite thing about watching sports. Like, that dude's life just changed right there. How did you digest that moment?
It's the whole thing, Spence, about a live theater.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you go to a Broadway show and you sit down and there's been reviews of the show and you're going there because you're excited to see it and you're going to be there for 3 hours and you know what you're going to get in terms of entertainment and you know how the play ends, right? The guy gets the girl and everybody's happy at the end or whatever. You know what's coming, but in sports and in these kinds of moments, you have no idea what is coming next. And for those guys to be put in the position of the weather, the rain, the wind, Spawn goes out 5 bogeys in the first 6 holes. Okay, well, it's just those are the conditions, and you got to hit the ball in the fairway. You can't get it out of the fairway, and if you do, then everybody's in the same boat, and he just held on and grind, and then in 13 and 14, there's like 5 guys all tied for the lead, and 3 other guys 1 shot back, and so all these guys on the leaderboard had a legitimate chance with 4 or 5 holes to play to come out and grab it. Who's gonna grab it? The one Masters I was fortunate enough to go to, Spence, in 2011. It was the same scenario. It was a beautiful day, nice weather on that particular day, but it was the same scenario on the leaderboard. Everybody had a legitimate chance to come up and grab it. And who does it? Of all people, Charles Schwartzel, who wins his 1 Masters in 2011, comes down the back 9 and goes birdie, birdie, birdie on 16, 17, 18, and just runs by everybody like in a horse race analogy in the last 50 yards, runs right by everybody and ends up winning by a half a length, whatever. And so J.J. Spawn is a grinder, 34-year-old guy, a journeyman guy who's had some success, but one of those guys who's really playing from year to year to just keep his tour card, and he's able to grind something out on a special Sunday afternoon for him, and then to do it with that putt that he didn't need the putt. Obviously he just had the 2-putt to win it, but for that thing to go in like it did, for him to win and clinch it right at that moment on the last stroke you take of a major, that's your defining moment. That's what you're going to have to carry with you the rest of your life, which is a great feeling.
Legendary. I mean, it was real, and I don't know. I didn't know much about JJ. I'd seen his name near the top of leaderboards. He has won on the tour before, and he's been right in the mix. Do you think we've seen the birth of a star on tour? I mean, he's got to be getting consideration for the Ryder Cup now, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's in. To me, Spence is in a mix with. There's a whole bunch of guys that are like him. Okay, not to diminish what he did, and not to diminish him as a player. He's a regular tour player, but he has been a grinded out kind of guy, and he has been from year to year really has been playing to get in a mix every now and then, but mostly to have enough success to be in the 125 so he can keep his tour card and keep going the next year, right? And so now he's 34 years old. He gets on top of this mountain at the moment, and he should be feeling really good about it, But there are a lot of those guys, whether it's Gary Woodland, who did it several years ago, in L.A., guys who come up and they win their one. Charles Schwartzel, I just mentioned, in 2011, Mike Weir, who's a longtime pro who's one of our favorites from the local area, who won the Masters, when his one major, these guys who are great, excellent golfers on the PGA Tour, but there's always something that separates them from the real top guys, and it's such a fine line. And you play 72 holes, and like we saw this past weekend, and you played in the all kinds of weather conditions, and the thing that separates you from the next guy is a 65-foot putt, is it, or one missed fairway where you had to hack it out just another 30 yards to get back in play, and that costs you an extra stroke, and now you lose the tournament by 1 or 2 or whatever. It's just that's how thin that line is over a 4-day period with the top golfers in the world. That's what makes it so daunting, but that's also what makes it so exhilarating as a fan to watch that live theater.
Yeah, I thought it was awesome. I was captivated. All right, Smitty, let's start here, and then we'll kind of move it into a direction and involve our local basketball team, the Utah Jazz. So there's a method to the madness. Stick with us. So kind of a shocking trade, kind of a trade that nobody saw coming. It was announced yesterday and made official that the Memphis Grizzlies traded Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Cole Anthony, 4 unprotected first-round picks, and 1 first-round pick swap. Okay, so let's start with what that says to you of the mentality of the Memphis Grizzlies. Why does Memphis do this deal?
Well, I think probably what they're looking at is that they're trying to, get off some money, okay, trying to manage their books a little bit. B, they look at what they've got going, and they see, okay, we're in the middle of the mix, but we don't really have anything that's going to jet propulse us, above and, to get in the top 3 or 4 teams, that, if everybody's healthy in the league, which you never can count on. And so we're making a calculated guesstimate that it's going to be better for us as long as we can get Morant and Jackson on the floor. We have 2 guys, okay? All right, we're giving up our 3rd guy. All right, maybe we can find another 3rd guy somehow, like they found Bane, who was an early 2nd-round pick, and we're talking all spring, Spence, about the draft and missing out on the top pick and having the 5th pick, and, what are we doing? And we're not going to get a guy and whatever. Desmond Bane was an early 2nd-round pick, by Memphis, and we always talk about you can find guys, but that's what your job is when you're in that position. You have to go identify them, you have to evaluate them, and then you have to figure out a way to procure them. And Memphis is looking at it, I think, probably and saying, well, if we can keep on Morant and Jackson for the next several years, then we have to just find another 3rd guy, and maybe we can get in another trade, or maybe KCP. I don't think he's that guy, but I think he's a good rotation guy now in his career. But maybe we find another young guy that we like to get in the mix, or maybe we get lucky in the draft, or maybe there's a guy we see in the draft that nobody else is seeing, and we got him in our back pocket. So we're going to go ahead and make this move because we think we can get that guy, and again, who that would be, I don't know, but that's one possible scenario. They've identified a guy they like that they're hearing around the league, nobody else is even talking about, and so if they can get another Bane like they did at 31, 32, whatever it was several years ago, and do something like that, then then they're feeling like they're getting their books down, but they're also giving themselves some more flexibility going forward to build that roster out and try and be competitive as long as Morant and Jackson are there to help them.
So I'm glad you brought that up. One more thing, and then we're going to bring the Jazz angle into this. I've heard and read several people surmise Memphis is open for business. This is a yard sale. I don't read it that way. Jazz under contract through 28. And, it's actually kind of a reasonable deal for who he is when his mind is right. And I don't know what sort of market there would be for him. I would say prior to all the gun chaos and off-court BS, there was probably a robust market for a talent like that at his age. I don't know what sort of calls they would receive if it was out there that he's available. Jaren Jackson Jr. is up for a contract extension, and he's going to get paid. I believe he's up for the Supermax because he won Defensive Player of the Year.
That's right. Yep.
So, look, if they put Jaren Jackson Jr. on the table, I think they get a lot of phone calls. I don't know that they get a ton for Ja right now. But I don't know that I read this as Memphis is now open for business and everyone's available. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, it could be. Maybe they're going to take a page out of the Utah Jazz book and just trade all their guys and start over because they're looking at the grand landscape from 30,000 feet and saying, well, let's see. OKC, they're the youngest team in the league, and they're about to maybe win a championship. And San Antonio is about to get another guy, and they're all of a sudden going to make a big leap, and they're young guys. And then we've got Denver is still sitting there in the weeds, and then we got Golden State. They just got Butler with we got Dallas and they're looking going, well, where are we going?
Yeah.
We can't get anywhere. We're going to get,
which is fair.
Yeah, so maybe they're looking at what the Jazz did a few years ago and saying, hey, maybe while our guys are good and highly thought of and we can get something for them, maybe we do that thing because I don't know where we're going. With our group that we got now, we like them. We think they're competitive. But these other guys are a step or two or three ahead of us, so we can grind and play hard and have everybody healthy and all that, and end up, in 6, 7, 8. And so, where are we going? So there's that scenario because you have to always marry that idea, Spence, the basketball stuff, roster building, with your financial and the business part of it. And sometimes you have to look at it and say, spending this amount of money on this group for the expected end result just doesn't make any sense. And so, we're better off recalibrating a step or two and trying, maybe to reinvent ourselves on the fly. I could see somebody saying, yeah, that's behind closed doors. That's what they're trying to do. I don't know. And I would also throw in the wrinkle that I would guess that if that's a scenario, that there's some weight on the idea that, they've grown tired of the Ja Morant, soap opera, and no matter how talented he is, that it's just not worth, all the heavy lifting it takes on the rest of the organization, to try and keep the ship going forward. And so maybe it's just time to cut bait and figure out what our plan B is.
So one more follow-up, then we're going to bring the Jazz into this because there's an interesting Jazz portion. Concerning Ja, and I can remember when, and this isn't a fair parallel, a perfect parallel, but you understand where I'm going. When, so news comes out, and this was before social media, it was before 24/7 inundation of information, that Latrell Sprewell had choked his coach. Right. And it's like, okay, what exactly what did that look? Because he was such a great talent, came out of Alabama. Nobody really knew what sort of NBA player he would be. Golden State kind of rises up to be this really exciting, great defensive wing that could get up and down, finish on the. He's never a great shooter, but he's a really good player. And then the thing comes out about Carlissimo, and it's like, okay, what's the deal? The Knicks at the time had an aging roster, and they were trying to make sure Ewing's final years in New York were supported with a good team. And I can remember when the opportunity came down for the Knicks to trade for Latrell Sprewell. And part of the package was going to be John Starks, who was like the heart of that team in the 90s. And there was a real debate, internal debate. And my dad flew Spree out, and he sat down with Jeff. Ernie Grunfeld was the one that was kind of like somewhat against this. And you get it, right? Now, Jeff was all for it because coaches want to win, and he knew he could coach him. He knew he was awesome. So with a talent like Ja, I suppose there's a market for it, but let's say you're running a team and Memphis calls and they say, what about Ja? What do you say? How does that process go down? And if Ja would be available, do you think the market would be robust enough to get what you should for a talent like that?
Well, it's so as in any shopper's market, Spence, it only takes one guy. Mm-hmm. So it only takes one general manager or one coach who has a lot of sway with the organization, to say, hey, I want that guy, or I can work with that guy, or, the other people are afraid of him or don't know how to handle him. I know how to do it, whatever it's going to be. Or you have a GM who feels like he's too talented, and you have to get him if you can, and then it's up to the coach to figure out how to work with them, and you have those conversations before you do anything like that, because you want to make sure everybody's on board. We had a scenario. I won't mention names, but we had a scenario years and years ago with the Jazz where we were looking at adding a player through free agency who we thought would be a good piece to what our core was still going on with Stockton and Malone. And one of our guys went out and made a bunch of phone calls and talked to people he knew were on the league or whatever, and comes back to a meeting and says, I did a bunch of homework on that guy. Yeah, what do you think? Well, I was 0 for 7. And we're sitting around the table going, 0 for 7, what does that mean? Well, I talked to 7 guys, and none of them can support the idea of us bringing that guy in for whatever the varying reasons. Right? Everybody had a different view, a different touch, a different experience. And then he said, however, having said that, I still think we need to bring him in because I think he can help us. And so there was a lot of debate about that and a lot of discussion about, well, what are we doing and how is it going to affect our overall group? And, at that time we had, 2 heavyweight guys in Stockton and Malone who we felt, could, along with obviously with Coach Sloan, could deal with whatever the fallout was going to be or the tough parts were going to be. And so, eventually that decision was made to go forward, but but there were a lot of discussion around, when you're adding someone like that into a mix, that you have to really be confident that your group, whether it's the coach, whether it's a couple of assistant coaches on your staff who know the guy or knew the guy in college or had prior experience with him on another team, or whatever it could be, that your group will be able to handle it in a way that's professional, that is going to get you the desired results that you're after, in that kind of move. And with those kinds of things, Spence, there's always a lot of moving parts, and there are a lot of things you have to consider before you really decide to pull the trigger on something that's going to really have a big effect, maybe one way, maybe the other way, on how your group performs.
Well said. Let's move over to the Jazz. And, it's interesting to consider exactly what the Memphis deal says on a number of different levels. And I bring that up because I didn't know Desmond Bane was available, right? So I bring that up because there are always players that are available that are really good that the public just doesn't know about.
But you knew Doncic was available.
No.
You knew that.
Another good example, right? That's why this league is wild. You wake up and you're like, wait, they traded who, right?
That's right.
So maybe the reason I bring it up in that context is Brian Windhorst goes on TV and references that he's been told the Jazz are going to try to level it up, whatever that means, right? So, I don't see that path, but I want to be fair. Maybe there are things out there that we have no idea about. So if that's the mentality of the Jazz now, if they're like, okay, we're gonna do the thing, we're gonna take this offseason, we're gonna add some pieces, and we're gonna be right in the mix next year. What does that look like? I don't know that I see it. And we'll get to the other path in a moment. And the other path is what I just talked about with Tom Haberstroh, engaging with the San Antonio Spurs or a team that's ahead of them, if they've identified the player they like, to go move up in the draft to get a young player that can grow with their other young players. That seems more sensible to me. But Windhorst is plugged in. He's an NBA reporter that people seem to trust. So if the Jazz are serious about adding to the group this year to take legitimate steps up next year, what do you think that looks like?
Well, I mean, again, Spence, there are a lot of different options and a lot of different ways they can go. And, as the old saying goes, it takes 2 to tango. So you can have an idea and you can say, this is what we want to do, and we can lay out a plan, and we want to add this kind of a guy, and we want to add that kind of a player, and we can shore up a couple of things on the wings with a couple of long defensive guys because we're one of the worst defensive teams in the league the last several years, and so we've got to start addressing that stuff. So, if you're looking at building a foundation and trying to get better, incrementally better, you have to do it, the old adage, brick by brick. So, if you need to lay a whole foundation, you may do it just one piece at a time and just keep waiting and waiting and waiting, or you can try and add 3 or 4 or 5 at one time, but it's going to take, you have to pay something for that. You just don't get that stuff for free. And so you're going to have to give up players or draft picks or, what have you, to be able to do something like that, but does it make sense in what your overall objective and your long-range game plan is? Like, for example, I heard you mention in the earlier segment with Tom about, just hypothetically a guy like Porzingis or a guy like Drew Holiday. Okay, older guys. Porzingis isn't old. He's right in his prime. But a guy like Drew Holiday, who's near toward the end of it, or if you had a chance at Kevin Durant, who somebody like that who's still a very good player, but what is it going to take to get them, and what real impact are they going to have on what you're trying to do, going forward and being sustainable for a while. Those are the things you have to factor in. You can say all you want about, we're gonna go fast and we're gonna get stuff done or whatever, but that is much harder to do, to say than it is to accomplish. And those are the things. Look, Austin Ainge is going to really work hard at it. He's going to give it a maximum attention and effort to trying to do those things. But he doesn't come in with a magic wand. He doesn't have a special potion just because he came from the vaunted Boston Celtics. That doesn't fly. You come with your own set of abilities and your skill set and your sensibilities to try and do what makes sense. But he doesn't have any magic answers. If there was such a thing, Danny Ainge would have had them, because Danny Ainge had already been through those kinds of mills several times, right? So he's going to come in, and Austin Ainge is going to try and do what he thinks makes sense, and he's going to throw stuff against the wall, and something's going to stick, and something's not, and he's going to come across some things that he might be able to act on, and there's going to be something that comes out, like you're referencing Desmond Bain, and we mentioned a guy like Luka Doncic, but something of that nature is going to come around the corner and is going to blindside you, whether it's the day before the draft or whether it's in the middle of the summer, whatever, where, like the Jazz did with Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, and all of a sudden, somebody's best player is on the market for whatever the reason, and the Jazz are going to try and get involved in that. Are they able to do something? Does it work? Who knows? But those are the kinds of things that trying to give the fans hope that we're trying these things. We're going to try a lot of different things. So hang with us, because if we can get some stuff done, it's going to be exciting, but are they going to get stuff done? Who knows? It's the whole thing is a crapshoot when it comes to working with other teams and what they're after and what their goal is in the deal as well. Other teams are going to want good players, right? So somebody's going to want Markkanen, right? Or somebody's going to want a young Kessler because they can add to their group because they think they have a chance to kind of win right now. The Jazz are trying to add guys who can help them to build a foundation of winning and getting better going forward without any expectation that we're going to be the Detroit Pistons, who I know you mentioned last time. The Detroit Pistons had several top 5 draft picks, okay? They were a bad team, but they kept drafting and drafting and drafting, and they had a couple guys, very good players that they got high in the draft, but those guys have been in and out the last few years, have been hurt.
Yep.
And this year, the guys are healthy, and they're playing, and they added the right veterans, by the way, with big influence from Dennis Lindsey, who's now with Detroit, and who knows what he's doing. And you saw the leap the Pistons took to get in the playoffs, and now they're expecting to be able to take that next leap going forward. And the Jazz are hoping to duplicate something like that in their work.
One more thing here. We'll catch a break. We'll do some NBA Finals coming up and talk about some more potential. We'll do a little draft on the other side, too. So player rankings are arbitrary, and it's eye of the beholder stuff. I get that. And every outlet does it. The Ringer does it every year. Then they update it throughout the course of the season. Desmond Bain, 47, which actually feels low to me. Larry Markkanen, 53. So that's essentially indicates that maybe they're in the same cul-de-sac. Maybe they're in the same area as far as, and look, like, what do you need? It's not like they're different players. I understand that. But if we agree to say, okay, in the ecosystem of pro basketball, these two are around top 50 guys, which again might be a little bit low. And we see what Memphis just received as a result of trading Desmond Bane. Is it a similar type expected return if the Jazz do decide to deal Lowry?
Yeah, it would be. It's always Spence. All those things are different. They are all. Everything is predicated on what you need, what you are trying to accomplish, and how much you value being able to get to the goal that you're trying to get to. For example, we talk about the Doncic and AD trade. Everybody says that Nico Harrison, got way too little and whatever, and settled, for 30 cents on the dollar or whatever, in terms of value of what he got. But to him, hard to believe we're still talking about this, but to him it was he valued getting Davis, an all-NBA player and defensive player, and a big who's a top-level player when he's healthy, and moving out someone who he didn't think fit the culture of what they were trying to build in Dallas. So other teams who aren't working with Doncic every day for 6 years, saw it differently and said, are you kidding me? What's going on? So everybody looks at it through a different lens. That's why you see guys who are, not really related, but just comes to mind, how you the eye of the beholder in the draft with Rafael Araujo, the player from BYU,
Sure,
right?
Yeah.
Toronto, for whatever their reason, okay, they valued him high enough where they took him number 8 in the draft.
I remember, yeah.
All of our research when we were in that draft showed us that if he didn't go 8 to that one team that decided to make that pick, he would have gone in the mid to late 40s. Okay? So that's how everybody else viewed it. Okay? Yeah. Guess what? Everybody else was pretty right.
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. Yeah.
But one team saw it differently, and one team interpreted what they saw through a different lens, and that's what makes the draft so fascinating, because you can get Araujo at 8, and in another year you can get Jalen Williams at 8, or another year you can get Steph Curry, who I think was 7, right? But the point being that those things, you look at it and everybody's got a different take, and that's why you don't have one guy in your room just making decisions. That's why you have a whole group of guys who are doing it all year long. And so you're sitting there, right now as we speak, 10 days away from the draft, and those guys are hammering it out and discussing and debating and throwing stuff across the room at the other guy who said, you want to take Spence Checketts? What are you, nuts?
Oh, he can really shoot it. Doesn't guard, but don't leave him open.
Yeah, but that's what happened, and that's what's interesting to me. Also, Spence, we talk about the draft stuff. It's really fascinating to me that the Jazz ownership, Ryan Smith, right? He's a decision maker, decides to bring in a lead decision maker 3 weeks before the draft. So you have a group in the room that's been working all year, and they've been working with each other, and they've been cross-referencing and cross-tracking guys, and they've been going to see guys, and they've been discussing in November and December and January about different guys. And, hey, Spence, you got to go see this guy. I just saw him last week. We want to put him on our list. Okay, I'll go see it, whatever. You got all of that, working together. You've got that flow. You've got that energy from the group. You've got the equity of the people in the room who have been there all year doing it. I've been listening to Spence Checketts every week in our meeting about what he's been saying about this guy, or how he changed his mind 2 months later, and this and that, whatever it is. And then here it is in the, use a baseball reference, in the 9th inning, and all of a sudden a new guy walks in the room, and we're not just adding a new guy in the room to the discussion, but it's a new guy who's the guy calling the shots.
Right.
So now we have a new boss in the room 3 weeks before the draft. That has got to be very very awkward for all the people involved. It really can really tip the balance of the discussions, of the vibe of the room, of what people have been discussing all year. It's really interesting that they chose to do that at that moment. They could have easily done something to add Austin Ainge to the group in some capacity, and then in August said, hey, we've discussed things and blah, 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 and we're going to make Austin Ainge the boss going forward or whatever. But they do that now. And so that's fascinating to me, because being in those rooms for a lot of years, doing something like that, can be very unsettling to a group that has been working in a certain direction for a lot of months and putting a lot of time and effort into it, and then having someone else come in, proverbially at the last minute, and maybe rock the boat or have and maybe it's good. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know, but I certainly know that it changes the vibe and the flow in the room, and that's going to be fascinating too when we get to see what kind of decisions the Jazz employ.
Still amazing that Ryan was able to hire Austin without ever mentioning a word to his dad.
That stuff happens all the time.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, people are kept out of the loop all the time.
And Austin never said anything to his dad.
Especially your family members.
Yeah, no, for sure. You never talk about any of that when it comes to changing your life entirely. All right, we'll catch a break. We'll do some NBA Finals and some NBA Draft coming up on the other side. Smitty live in studio. Don't forget Bill Riley on the other side of 4:30. Busy Monday show. Good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. Smitty taking a victory lap during the break about his Red Sox beating my Yankees over the weekend. John Carlos Stanton will be activated tonight, Smitty. How about that, huh?
How about that? And you know what? He's being activated. He's in New York, and nobody knows about it because Ohtani's pitching tonight in L.A.
Mm-hmm. You know, we probably don't talk enough about Ohtani, right? Like in the context of really being as unique as any player has ever been to his respective sport, right? I mean, he probably deserves more airtime like everywhere. Every time I see a highlight or see a stat and not really understand how specifically unique he is, I'm like, we should talk about this dude more than we do.
Yeah, you know what's interesting though, Spence, when you get guys that are like international players and they're reticent to speak the language, and some of them can speak, somewhat, and but they're uncomfortable in front of a media and the public speaking because they don't want to make a mistake and they don't want to look foolish, and so they err on the side of not saying anything and talking their native language through an interpreter, and so sometimes that loses a little bit of the luster or the attention you might get on what you're doing, but Ohtani, this is like a generational guy, like just what he, not only what he does, but how he handles his business every single day and goes about being a two-way player. Now we're going to see how much of his arm is still there and how he eases back into it. He's going to open tonight, maybe pitch just the first inning if he gets through the first inning, and maybe they'll see how he feels. And he says, yeah, I can go out and throw another 10 pitches, so we'll let him go out in the second inning and see how that goes and ease him into it. But he still wants to be in the rhythm of pitching and hitting and pitching and hitting and playing all the time. That's what he's used to doing. That's where he gets his rhythm for being able to focus all the time. And it's going to be exciting to see how he performs tonight. First time in almost 2 years on the mound.
Total non sequitur, random question, but It was based off of what you said last segment about Rafael Araujo.
Yes.
Who I can remember like scouting during that time and watching him play and being like, well, he's bad at basketball. I know he's big and strong, but he doesn't do anything. He can't shoot, he can't dribble, he doesn't move well, but he's just big. So stunned that he was drafted 8. I wanted to ask, what was your – because I had a really unique experience at the Mountain West Conference tournament when Fredette was Fredette, when Jimmer was Jimmering. And it was actually Danny Ainge who said, come sit by me and let's watch this game. And it was when Jimmer went for I think it was 42 against Kawhi in San Diego State. And I said to Danny, what do you think as far as Jimmer as an NBA prospect? He said he has no shot. He doesn't have a chance. It's like, well, you're a BYU guy, right? And he kind of walked me through his assertion as to why he didn't believe Fredette was an NBA player. He was a lottery pick. And BYU fans that love to be revisionist historians will say he wasn't used correctly by Keith Smart. And then, that hindered he would have led the NBA in scoring if he landed. It's very Zach Wilson Jets. You just don't want to say out loud that he might not be very good. What was your calculation on Fredette as a pro?
Yeah. We thought our group, really was mixed on him, mostly about whether he could be a fringe or rotational guy, or whether he just wasn't good enough to play at the NBA level. I personally always thought that he was the kind of guy, who would thrive either in Europe because of the way they play. Mm-hmm. I really thought he'd be a good player in the EuroLeague, which is a top level league, or a place where he ended up, which was the best thing for him in the long run, playing in China, where there is no defense and where he could shoot 35 balls a game, which he did.
The ball is yours. Do the Jimmer
and
thing.
He did it, and he was the star, and he was playing in Shanghai, which is like playing in New York City. So he's getting all the endorsements, and he's getting all the love from the fans and all that kind of stuff. And he didn't have to worry about playing defense. He didn't have to worry about not being very athletic. And that league is that way. And it was a good spot for him. Made a lot of money. Got to play a lot for him. He was bounced around several NBA teams, just not athletic enough, not quite good enough, to stick with a team to be able to offer something like that. Like we had J.C. Carroll in for a workout when he was coming out of Utah State, Utah State's all-time leading scorer. And I remember meeting with JC and saying to him, hey, you have to have one skill you can lay on, and you have to be able to do that at such a high level to just get a foot in the door. And for him, it was going to be, being his catch and shoot jumper.
Can you
right?
get your shot off? Yeah.
And it wasn't going to work out in the NBA because he's a 6'2" shooting guard. But he went to Europe and got his foot in the door with Real Madrid and became a main guy and a rotational guy and a key piece to several EuroLeague and La Liga ACB championship teams in Madrid, and became a mainstay in Real Madrid for over a decade, and was a very good player in Europe. And Jimmer, I always thought he could have been that. He had 1 year at Panathinaikos in Athens, and they're can be a top level team. In fact, just won the EuroLeague, last year. But they're a team that where he could have a chance, but they kind of have a goofy owner, who gets involved in everything there, and he didn't get any traction with them. And I think smart for him, he went back to Shanghai and where he could play his game and make some money and have a good successful career that way. So I don't think Jimmer was taken 10 by Sacramento, and he was the perfect example, Spence, of how the CBA is set up to work. And that is, on the one end, you can have like a Gordon Hayward, who if a team drafts you and they like you and they develop you and they want you, the team controls your career for the first 7 years. And then the back half of your career, you control where you want to go. And we saw that with Gordon Hayward when he had the free agency after the 7th year and chose to go to Boston. Jimmer Fredette was taken the first round. You get 2 years guaranteed money. You have a 3rd-year team option and a 4th-year team option. Sacramento took him. They had him for 2 years. They liked him as a player. They liked him as a guy, as a person, as a worker, all that stuff. They determined after 2 years he's just not an NBA guy. Mm-hmm. So instead of continuing to have him on the roster and to pay him money, and we just don't believe he can do it, we're just going to cut our losses. So in that example, they drafted him. They go for he plays for 2 years. He gets the guaranteed money, and then they let him go. And now he's a free agent and do whatever he wants. Mm-hmm. But then the team is out of the obligation, and they can move on to make other decisions. Yep. That's how the CBA is set up to work. Oddly enough, 2 guys involved locally that we know very well, Jimmer Fredette on one end and Gordon Hayward on the other end. They are prime examples of how the CBA is set up to work. Yep. In the way that the teams choose to do.
All right, let's do one more Jazz thought because I didn't get to this last segment. Then we'll end with your thoughts on tonight's Game 5. It's a massive game. It's about 2 hours and 20 minutes away. You can hear it on our station. It's OKC, Indiana, Game 5 of the NBA Finals. So we discussed the Windhorst stuff where he's been told the Jazz are going to try to take steps forward and add to the group and maybe win at a higher level next year. I'm not buying it because I just don't think it's the right approach. As I have said a million times and will say another million times, 8th pick, top 8 protected pick that goes to OKC. At this point in your journey, you have to hold on to it. That's my opinion. So the other avenue that Tom Haberstroh and I spoke about is if San Antonio is willing to move on from 2 and the Jazz have done their determination that Dylan Harper, as you would say, is a guy, the guy, somebody that you can say, okay, maybe this is our Cade, maybe this is our Banchero, maybe this is our Tyrese. Maybe this is the guy that can actually be a guy that we can build around. San Antonio, it's interesting. Like I don't think they would trade Devin Vassell. They're obviously not trading Wembanyama. They're obviously not trading Stephon Castle. So the framework of a deal, Smitty, that could work would sound like this. Keldon Johnson, who there's some things I like about Keldon Johnson. Like he's still young. He's 25, doesn't shoot it all that well. He was about 12 points, 5 boards last year. And Harrison Barnes. In exchange for Lauri Markkanen, number 5, you move up to 2. You bring in Johnson and Barnes just for salary matches, and you go up to 2 and you grab Dylan Harper. Something like that seems to make a lot more sense than like if you add Porzingis and Holiday to this team now for nothing in return, you're still treading water. Right. So that direction seems to make more sense to me, just generally speaking. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, Spence, if you've determined that in this scenario that Dylan Harper, you think he's going to be the next John Morant or the next Damian Lillard or the next Gilgeous-Alexander, whatever. If you think he can be that kind of a guy and drive a team that way, then you do. If you're in the Jazz's seat, you do whatever you have to do to get that guy, because it doesn't matter, because the guys you're giving up, the assets you're giving up, what does it matter? That's why you have them. So when you have an opportunity to land on a guy that you believe can be one of your main guys long-term going forward, you do that. Now, I do remember, and I don't know if it's been talked about, reported on lately, in that framework, way back early in the season, I remember there was some quote from his dad saying something about, my son, I don't want my son playing in Utah or something.
Yeah, he sent out something on social media.
Yeah, it was something like that.
Yep.
But okay, whatever. But those are real things. So if you that's how Eli Manning got from, instead of being in San Diego, got to New York Giants, because he said he's not going to play in San Diego. And that's what John Elway did. And he wasn't going to play for Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
That's how he ended up in Denver and all these kind of things. So if a guy is saying right out of the chute, if that's true, I don't know if it is or not. And it wasn't him; it was his dad, whatever. And I don't know this kid, and I haven't been in a room with him, so I don't know how he interviews, what his personality is, whatever. But if those things line up and those things match up to what you're trying to do, and his talent is something that you think is really has a chance to be a special thing, especially at the point guard position, that's a guy you want to get your hands on, because as we just mentioned, Spence, you're resetting the salary clock, okay? Because you get out of Markkanen's money in that scenario. You bring in Barnes, you bring in somebody to get money for a year or so, and then that money goes away. But you'd have Harper for at least a minimum of 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Under control while you try and build stuff around him. If that's something that you're convinced about is a real thing and that you would like to hang your hat on, then those are the kinds of things that you as a Jazz have been positioning yourself to do. And now if this is something that might be presented and might be on the table, that's the kind of thing that, from my perspective, you just you do that Jim Fossil thing. You just push all your chips in the middle of the table, and you bet on that one hand, and you do whatever you got to do to make that move happen. And that's the kind of stuff, Spence, that really also regenerates or reignites, I should say, a fan base,
mm-hmm.
right? Because they say, oh, you got a guy you really like. Oh, and you're really going after it, and you got him, and you're bringing him. Okay, let's go. And then you see it plays out how it plays out. But those are the kind of moves that you want to be in position to be able to do, and if they're there, you want to really be able to make your full commitment to pounce on it.
Man, if San Antonio added Lauri Markkanen and let's say VJ Edgecombe or Trey Johnson to this group, talk about ahead of schedule. So we'll see. All right, Smitty, before I set you loose, I think my favorite thing about the NBA Finals is, from my prism, all 4 games have been really different, right? And this is a battle of 2 very well-respected, smart coaches and 2 groups that have been able to come together and in different ways been able to find success. I keep saying, since January, the 2 best teams in the NBA are these 2 teams. OKC is 1 and the Pacers are 2. So we saw Mark Daigneault in Game 4 take Shea off the ball and actually give Shea more rest. And Jalen was kind of initiating the offense. So if you didn't watch the game and you look at Shea's line, you said, wait, 0 assists? What gives? That was part of the design. He was not initiating. It allowed him to stay fresh, and in the fourth quarter, he closed. He had 15 in the fourth. They outscored Indiana 12-1 down the stretch to get the win in Game 4. We go back to OKC tonight for Game 5. Obviously very pivotal. It's 2-2. What do you think goes down?
Yeah, well, it's a fun series to watch. And I don't count out anybody, Spence. You like OKC. I like OKC. The defense has been unbelievable all year and during the playoffs, and they can ratchet it up. But Indiana has had some special thing going on, And you can look at all the 3 series they had before this, and they had, as you well know, being a Knicks guy, special bounces of the ball and special things that happen.
Have the Knicks contacted you about the coaching job yet, by the way? Just real quick.
I am on the bottom of the list.
Okay.
But they're getting very close to me.
Well,
so,
sorry, as
so
you were.
So we will see.
Fair enough.
But with that, Indiana has had a lot of things go their way, and a lot of them have been because of them. What we always use the word. You want to if you make an error doing something, you want to make an error of commission rather than an error of omission, meaning if you're going to fail at something, you want to try and get something done and try and go after it. Those guys have gotten to where they are because they just keep getting after it. And even when they're down a bunch, as we've seen in several of their playoff games, they just keep grinding and going after it. They don't give up. They don't wave a white flag. They keep getting after it, and they've shown what you can do when you play a full 48 minutes. The old Yogi Berra line that it ain't over till it's over. And so, I don't put anything by them. I'm excited for the game tonight. It's going to be fun, for those guys to see both teams lay it all out there. And again, Spence, you just hope it doesn't hinge on somebody having an early Jason Tatum type injury or somebody getting 3 early fouls and 2 ticky-tack foul calls, and now they're out of the game for a big stretch. You just hope they can both go full bore and go at it, and then see, like we did in the U.S. Open yesterday, see what happens coming down the stretch in the fourth quarter.
Should be fun, man. I've been wildly impressed with both these teams for different reasons. So Game 5 tonight comes your way about 2 hours from right now, 6:30 Mountain Time. We'll say goodnight at 6 o'clock. Smitty, great to see you, my friend.
Great to see you, and we're gonna be do a big show next week, right?
Yes, we are.
We're
Draft night coverage,
stuff, right?
Smitty, Gordy, and we will be on location for both round 1 and round 2.
Oh, good.
June the 25th, June the 26th. And when I have all the information, you'll be the first to know. I promise you that.
I'll be the first. I'll be the first to know. Yeah.
Well, I don't know yet. When I know, I promise you will know. Okay?
There we go. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
We'll see you next week, okay?
All right, man.
All right, the great Richard
it.
Smith. We'll catch a quick break. We're going to bring in the voice of the Utes himself. Bill Riley is our next guest on the other side of a quick break. On the Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. I'm just realizing I dropped the ball. My bad. Lot going on. Fluid situation. Busy show. And I was supposed to bring in our next guest with the best boy band in the history of Provo. And, of course, I don't have to say the name because everybody knows who I'm talking about when I say that. Riles, Jericho Road. I forgot, man. I apologize. How are you, bud?
We've got a lot more appearances coming up through the summer and fall. I have no doubt that Porter will be able to find some. I mean, who doesn't love a little good JR on a Monday afternoon? Don't
call them JR. And in an honest moment, I'm actually very upset you reintroduced them to me because I may have gone down a rabbit hole to watch their music. It's the most irritating thing in the world. So I'm actually kind of mad at you, Bill.
Are they still playing? You know, are they still doing summer tours? Are they hitting, you know, linger longers and trying to get people to rekindle their careers?
I really hope not, because now they're probably in their late 40s. But the one that looks like Tony Jones is probably still making music somewhere.
I hope Tony's listening. He probably has no idea who they are. Now he's going to Google them.
Jericho Road has a member that looks like Tony Jones. That's stop me when I'm lying, Bill. Stop me when I'm lying.
I'm not stopping you.
Okay, fair enough. How you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. What's got the attention? What's got the Bill Riley attention these days?
Well, today I was fortunate enough to sit down with some of the football coaches, putting kind of a podcast series together with Utah football that will drop a little bit later on this summer. So I was kind of in a little bit of a football mode. Porter reminded me, I believe we're 75 days until kickoff, so that's there. And outside of that, I've not been wildly entertained by the NBA final. I don't know why. I've tried. It's just not catching me, but the hockey is. I've been all in on Panthers Oilers.
Yeah, the Stanley Cup final has been awesome. It has been every year it's great. I'm hoping for 7 games. I feel like Florida might close it out tomorrow. But since you know, our listeners are always interested for a little behind the scenes peek at the Utah football program, and we'll do some Big 12 basketball schedule stuff and maybe some House v NCAA because everybody wants to talk about that. But since you are behind closed doors now in a way that you didn't used to be working up there, what can you shed on a little light as far as the coaching situation, how they're feeling, and maybe, you know, expand on this podcast series you have coming up?
It's well, the series will be kind of a little bit later on this summer. It's just me sitting down. It's not all football. It's just kind of like lifetimes. How did you get here? Things like that. Kind of diving. They're not super long. They're not Joe Rogan 3-hour long deals, but it's kind of a good snapshot. And there's a handful of new coaches on the staff. Some of the guys have been there. It's just kind of you know, talking about football and careers and things like that. It's been a lot of fun to catch up with these guys. I know them, but you know, some of the guys you see, and everybody's always busy. This has been a fun time just to kind of sit down and catch up and reconnect with them. But as far as, you know, I'm over at the football building a couple of times a week, and you know, it's a lot of what we talked about, Spence. There's just a really good vibe around the group. I mean, there just really is. Talking to some of the defensive coaches, they saw that offense firsthand this spring. They're excited about what the possibilities are. You talk to the offensive coaches, they're like, hey, man, we went against one of the best defenses all spring in the Big 12 in college football, and it's, you know, kind of the iron sharpens iron thing. So, you know, they're still a month and a half out from camp beginning, but there's a really good vibe, and I think there's a lot of excitement in the building, not just among the coaches. When you talk to the players, there's a good buzz about it too. So that's just kind of where football is right now. But I'll give you some dates maybe on a future hit with you on when some of these podcasts are going to drop. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be a nice look inside of Utah football on the coaching side of things.
So just to be clear, we're not going to get 2 hours of Jim Harding on ivermectin. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, probably not. More alien sightings with Mark Atuwaya.
Okay, fair. Hey, I'm an idea man. I think there might be something there, but fair enough. So I know that as an employee, you can't speak about the past, 3 or 4 weeks when they've been hosting recruits, but we do have media information on players that have signed. So I'll leave that aside for the sake of this conversation. Give our listeners kind of an inside peek on what these visits are like and what the coaching staff says to the players and how they're kind of selling their program to these young men.
I think they're really obviously selling culture. They always sell culture up there. And even with all the changes in college football, one of the constants, I think, has been the culture and the family atmosphere that Kyle Whittingham, and before Kyle, it was Ron McBride, have really fostered up there. And I think in this day and age where you go around a lot of places, I think some of the feedback is that a lot of places these recruits go, we know money is going to certainly be a component of it, but the feedback that they get a lot from these recruits is how impressed they are by the culture and the continuity up there with the Utah coaching staff and even the players within the building. And, in the years, here's interesting, I got this from a few different people. One of the guys, and we talked about this a little bit with Cam Rising and even Britton Covey when he was there, how those guys were such great ambassadors for Utah football and were really in on the recruiting. I've been told by a number of people that Devin Dampier, we're talking about a guy that's been here all of 6 months. He's already won over his teammates, but apparently he's been a guy that's been all in and during the recruiting process and being, wanting to meet with recruits and talk with guys and do some of that stuff. So I think the message has really been a positive one. And I think the new offense certainly is getting some shine too, because of some of the track record that Beck has had at both Syracuse, but even last year at New Mexico.
What have you learned about Coach Beck? Of course, new offensive coordinator. A lot of Ute fans very excited about this new offense with Devin and Wayshawn and some other new pieces. But from the day and it's one thing to read about him. It's one thing to watch film on his previous offenses or what have you. It's another thing to know the measure of the man. It's another thing to get to know him and talk to him. And in the course of the months he's been on campus, what sort of information can you shed as far as getting to know him? What kind of person is he? What kind of coach is he?
Well, he's a great guy. His door is always open. Sometimes coaches, even if you pop by, they're like, oh, hi, well, I'm busy. Jason's one of these really outgoing, affable guys who it feels like every time I bump into him, we talk for 5 or 10 minutes about football and about life and about his move and getting the family here and being back here in Utah and how excited they are. But from a football standpoint, a lot of the feedback I've gotten in talking to players and coaches through the spring as they integrate this offense is how malleable it is, meaning he's a guy that has an idea of what he wants to do, but what he's really good at doing, because he did it at both Syracuse and New Mexico, is adapt his offense to the personnel that he has, if that makes sense. A lot of guys talk about it, but what they did in the 1 year at New Mexico was pretty impressive, being fourth in the NCAA in total offense when, Devin Dampier hadn't really been a starter, and some of the guys that they had were first year in the program. So what I've gotten is he's been really good at bringing these guys up to speed and melding his offensive philosophy with the guys that are in the program already. So I think that people are going to be very pleasantly surprised when they see this offense roll out this fall against UCLA and Cal Poly and Wyoming, and then obviously into conference play.
So I was reading a Big 12. I mean, this is the time of year where all the, previews come out and people are trying to prognosticate about predictions and such. And I believe I read Utah is near the bottom of the conference at returning starters, which maybe some years that's not necessarily a good thing, but coming off a year where it was tough sledding in a lot of ways, that may not necessarily be a bad thing. 40 newcomers, according to Coach Witt. It's looking like at this point the total includes 22 high school signees from the early signing period and 18 transfers overall. So talk to me about that dynamic, Riles. Like, again, some years maybe losing a number of different starters for whatever reason could be catastrophic. It doesn't feel like that's the deal this year with all the buzz surrounding the 40 newcomers. Tell me your thoughts on that dynamic.
Offensively, about the only starters you have returning are the offensive line. Running backs are new. Wide receivers are new. The tight ends that played last year really a lot are all gone. So, the offensive line is going to be really good, and they're all back. But it almost feels like, Utah was recruited for a former offense, Andy Ludwig offense. A lot of that personnel was brought in for that. I don't think it's such a bad thing, especially in this day and age where rosters turn over so much. that you've got some new faces on offense. Defensively, they lost some starters, Spence, but because of all the injuries they had last year, so many of those guys played. So I don't think it's as big a deal on defense, and they actually return a bunch of starters on defense. But on the offensive side, especially with the changeover on offense, I don't think it's such a bad thing. Plus, you've upgraded your quarterback position. In some ways, I think you've probably upgraded your starting tailback, plus the overall depth at tailback. Tight end isn't going to be as big a part of the offense as it was maybe under Andy Ludwig. That's not to say it won't be a part of it, but you're not going to probably see as much 3 tight end sets as you did when Andy was calling the plays. The real big question still is, and they added some nice pieces in the summer portal period or the spring portal period at wide receiver, who those top 6 or 7 wide receivers are. And so I think that's really the big task that Jason Beck and Micah Simon, the wide receivers coach, have once they get back together with camp at the end of July.
It's always an interesting conversation to have about the dynamic between Coach Witt and his offensive coordinator. And, for a long time, there was so much turnover that there wasn't a lot of continuity. Coach Ludd brought that to the program, and oftentimes it was discussed about how much autonomy that Andy had juxtaposed to the influence that Kyle has on a program that is his to run. Bottom line, the bottom line is the buck will always stop with him. But tell me what you've noticed about the relationship and the dynamic between Coach Beck and Coach Witt as far as how you think that's going to work with communication and autonomy and all those things.
Well, I haven't seen a lot of it only because it was spring ball. I mean, Kyle was around a little bit watching the new offense, but he's such a CEO. You see him at practice moving around, watching the offense, watching the defense, watching different things. I think that's a relationship, obviously, because they've never worked together, that's still evolving. But my sense is he hired Jason for a reason. He liked his offense. And I know that Morgan Scalley had some input on it, too, because obviously Scalley's there. And I think Morgan's made the comment a couple of different times that, hey, what he likes about the offense that Beck runs is Jason Beck is very good at finding ways to stress your defense, finding that weak link or where you're not quite as good defensively and then exploiting it. And so I think that's a lot of what Kyle was looking for, something that was a little bit more simplistic, that's a little bit more plug and play, but something that could stress other defenses while still kind of maintaining, and Beck's offenses do this, there's balance with it. I mean, they ran for over 3,000 yards last year at New Mexico. They threw for about 3,000 and they rushed for 3,000. That's pretty good balance. But as far as how the dynamic goes, I haven't seen it enough. I haven't been around it enough. I think it'll take kind of a fall, but I'm sure it's just kind of an evolving relationship now just because they haven't worked together a ton.
So last Friday, and you'll get a kick out of this because you did this job on a daily basis for how many years? How many years did you do a daily radio show, Bill?
Right about 27.
All right. So you did it for a long, long time. Next year will be 20 for me, full time. I did part time for about 4 or 5. So I'm getting close to you, Riles, but I got a few years left before I can say 27. So, when you finish a show and you get an alert 5 minutes later that something sizable has happened, you're like, oh, man. So Friday news dump last Friday, House v. NCAA is across the line. All right. So here's where I want to start with this portion of the conversation. There are a lot of people that are saying, okay, finally even playing field, finally rules regulation. Will this sport ever have an even playing field, or will there always be a car dealer in Tuscaloosa that's willing to pay a player $5 million or whatever? Is it possible to make an absolutely even playing field so the Utahs and the BYUs can keep up with the Oklahomas and the Texases and the Bamas? Is that ever going to be a thing?
Well, no, I don't think even playing field. What this does is kind of balance it out a little bit more, but you're still able to donate to your, I don't know if collective is the right word anymore. Some are still separate. Some have been brought in-house. That house settlement money is almost just kind of like a floor or a baseline, Spence. There's going to be programs that are still going to be spending more and above that based on donations that come in. But that does enable schools to be able to remain competitive in some places. But the Ohio States and the Oregons and the Michigans and maybe the USCs of the world, they're, if they're committed, and it doesn't even have to be just those schools where they're committed to it, they'll probably still go above and beyond that. But what it does do is give schools the ability to be able to be competitive to a certain level. But unless you went to a full-on salary cap, and here's the other problem, and we've seen this forever in collegiate athletics, Spence, people have always been willing to break the rules or bend the rules or circumvent the rules. Now, there's supposed to be a third party coming in that's supposed to be, kind of the law enforcement branch of this, and there's supposed to be very punitive penalties if schools are found to be breaking rules. But we've heard that before with the NCAA. I'm going to be really curious to see how that works. But, unless you go to some sort of a pro model where, you can't circumvent the salary cap in the National Football League. Other leagues do. I mean, nobody else has a hard cap. They have aprons and luxury taxes and things like that. But if you want to be truly even, the only way to do that is to go to a hard cap. And there's only one place that's done that really in all of sports. Well, I shouldn't say that because I think the NHL has a hard cap too, don't they? So maybe the NFL and the NHL, I think, are the only two professional sports to do that. But I don't see a day anytime soon where college athletics is even for everybody.
Yeah, I don't see that. I don't see that day ever, quite frankly. And yes, I mean, I do believe that collective bargaining is needed, and I think at some point, powerful attorneys will step in and unionize these young people that play sports and institutions and implement collective bargaining with the governing bodies. I don't know if that's for all sports, probably not, but certainly for football and basketball. And I want to move over here. So, according to Dan Wetzel, the initial estimate within the industry as far as how athletic departments will disseminate the cash they have at their disposal to pay these players now. So $20.5 million. Okay, so 75% of that allocated to football players, 15% of that allocated to men's basketball players, 5% to women's basketball players, and then 5% to other sports. Now, Mark, if you're listening, I'm asking him the question, so get off him if you don't like the answer. Do you have any insight as to how Utah plans to disseminate their $20.5 million?
No, I don't. I haven't sat in on any of those meetings. I don't know if that will become public either. I think what Wetzel did was probably average it based on his guesstimations and talking to people. That feels a little high, not completely high, but I think I was on with Sean on Friday, and I said probably in that 65 to 70% range would be probably where you saw football. One, because it's the engine that drives the machine, but two, there's just so many more players on the roster. You need more money to be able to fund that. So again, everybody's guessing at it. It sounds a little high to me, the Wetzel numbers. Not too high, but it sounds a little high. I would guess more in the 65 to 70 range, probably for football across the board. And I would say men's basketball probably will get, in the neighborhood of 15 to 18%. And then women's basketball in that 5 to 10, and the rest spread out among the Olympic sports would be my guess.
Now, when it comes to NIL, I think there are people that maybe don't fully grasp that this is not that, okay? This is money that schools can now pay the players. NIL is separate from it. You referenced this new college sports commission that's being run by Brian Seeley, who was a former Major League Baseball executive. So now everybody has to report NIL deals of $600 or more, and it goes through kind of this algorithm. Deloitte, some other software will be involved. I wonder if you have any insight on how, if at all, this affects the University of Utah.
No, athletes will still be able to go out and pursue individual deals. There's no doubt about that. And in a lot of ways, the athletic department, the Crimson Club, all those folks are going to do their best. They have been already. They're going to make even more of a concerted effort on top of what you said. And you said it correct. The settlement is different, but most of these universities, and Utah included, have a section of their athletic department now dedicated to this, and they want to do their best to help these athletes. Like you said, whether it's a $600 deal or whether it's a $60,000 deal, help connect them with donors or business owners in the community to be able to do that. So, yes, I think we've conflated the terms NIL and for a long, long time. The true nature of name, image, and likeness was supposed to be about the individual going out and kind of seeking it on their own. And I think that's still there. And I think schools, including Utah, are going to try to get back to that a lot more and help their athletes connect on top of what we had already talked about with the House settlement money.
What have been your impressions of Brett Yormark? I forgot to ask you this last hit because he signed a contract extension. We had a chance to sit with him Big 12 Media Days. I'm sure we'll have a chance doing that coming up in just a few weeks in Dallas. But whether it's being able to interview him or just kind of sit back and witness the way he's gone about his business, what's your impression of the Big 12 commissioner?
I've not had a chance to interview him. Before I left the station last year, I tried and tried and tried, and I was never able to connect with it. I'm hoping – I'm going to be down at Big 12 Media Days as well. I'm hoping to get a chance to do that. What I like about Brett Yormark is he's out there and he's not taking about. I always kind of felt like until the very, very end, where the Pac-12 was fighting for its life, that the Pac-12 was a lot more reactive versus proactive. And I like the fact that Yormark, in a lot of things, nobody's perfect. But I like the fact that he's a lot more proactive, whether it's with college basketball ideas or marketing the league. Or I liked when, the Big Ten was trying to shove all those automatic bids down everybody's throat for the college football playoff. I've never understood that, Spence. Why do we give multiple automatic bids for all these different, we don't do the college basketball tournament's what we all love. You get one automatic bid as a conference champion, then everything else is up in the air. I never understood. I love the 5-11 matchup where every conference champion, the 5 big conferences or the 4 and then the 1 get an automatic bid. Then there's 11 at larges. You're trying to get the best teams in there. And I liked what Yormark said about that is, if you're having a good year, then you deserve it. If you're not, why should you get more automatic bids than you actually deserve? So roundabout way to say what you said. It's still a small sample size. I'd like to get a chance to talk with him, but from afar, I think Utah being in the Big 12 and Yormark as a commissioner has been positive.
Reports today, more conference alignment on the way. It doesn't really affect Utah or the Big 12. And this is another deal. I've just become resigned to the fact that we are going to have to deal with stuff like this probably in perpetuity, and there will be appeals to lawsuits that have been settled, and it's just the lawyers are just going to get rich, and we're all going to sit back and wait for Saturdays in the fall. But before we get to basketball, and we'll end with some hoops, are you still in a space where you believe college football eventually will mirror the NFL, or do you think it's got to kind of be what it is, and we're just going to continue to see lawsuits filed here and appeals filed there, and we're just going to kind of have to deal with the chaos, kind of moving forward?
It feels like we're trending toward the Super League. And I think whatever that Super League happens to be, whether it's 30, 40, 50, or 60 teams, I think that's set up because I think it's going to be separate from everything else. Again, this is just me hypothesizing. I think that will be an NFL-type model. It will be a pro-type model to it, whether it's wild cards or conference champions or whatever it is. I think when the day comes, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years from now, when college football does eventually go to that Super League, I think it's going to have very much a pro and kind of an NFL feel to it. I don't know what happens with the rest of it. I don't know what happens with basketball at that point, if conferences are still a thing for everything but football. But my sense is on the football side of it, we're trending toward the Super League at some point, and I think that will have a bit more of a pro model to it.
All right, before I set you loose, summer practice going on for the basketball team, and the roster has been completed with a German guard. I believe it's Jacob Patrick. That doesn't sound like a German player, but there you go. So I don't know if you've had a chance to witness any of the practices. We had Al on a couple of weeks ago, and we kind of got to know some of these new players. But just your thoughts on, and also realistic expectations, year one in the Big 12 for this roster and this new coaching staff. Any information on the new basketball team led by former Ute Alex Jensen?
I think if you want to make it sound more German, you go with Jakob.
There we
Patrick.
go. Okay,
and
I like it.
That'll make it feel more. I've seen him working out a little bit. I've seen a little bit of open gym. Here's what I think. I think that they have gone with the upgraded athletic, get after it model, kind of in just talking with Alex, and you've talked to him too, I just get the sense they're building this foundation and they want to really get after it defensively and they want to get out and run. And I think they've gone out and identified guys that fit with where they're at with all of that. I don't have any idea yet. I want to see them kind of on the floor a little bit more together. But, I've said it before and I'll say it again. When you're at the University of Utah, your expectation should always be competing for an NCAA tournament berth. I know that they've turned the roster over, but I think if you're at Utah with the resources Utah has, I think that you should be able to at least compete for an NCAA. I'm not saying it'll happen in year one with 12 new faces, but we've seen that happen in other places around the country. But I think they should certainly be competitive and be in the conversation. You want Lenardi talking about you at least, if that makes sense, sometime in February and March.
No doubt. All right, Riles, I'll let you go so you can go into the rabbit hole of Jericho Road's greatest hits. I appreciate don't do that. It will put you in such a bad mood. But I appreciate the time, man.
I can't believe you did that, by the way. How long were you in the rabbit hole?
I watched 4 or 5 Jericho Road videos, and I just hated myself afterwards. So I would not.
Did it take you back?
It did. By the way, how did that become a thing on our show? I honestly don't remember.
It may have been a Shep thing.
Okay.
He may have brought it up. We may have been talking about boy bands. You and I may have been something. It might have been a Nick Lachey 98 Degrees
there
reference, and then Shep may have injected. Oh, have you guys heard about the Utah County version of 98 Degrees? And you and I would have gone, what are you talking about? And then he would have introduced Jericho Road to us.
That sounds right. Or you were expressing your admiration for Lou Pearlman. I cannot remember which one it was, Bill.
Thanks, Ben.
See you, buddy. Bill Riley, voice of the Utes. All right, let's bring in Ryan from the Dish Bros before we get to the final hour of the program. Give him a call at 801-424-DISH. Save money on a bunch of things. What's going on, Ryan?
Yeah, this opportunity right now, this promotion is so sweet. And it reminds me of back in the day, 22 years ago when we were selling Dish. We had this promotion where you got 3 months free. Now, TV's changed a little bit, and prices are not quite the same. So this is actually a bigger value by a long ways because you do get full 3 months of service, plus you get the new customer offer with credits, and the price is guaranteed not to change for the next 2 years. Listen, biggest DVR out there, auto hops commercials. Nobody else has this. It auto-records your locals. It'll auto-record your games for you. It also has the ability to give you access to every streaming app that you want, all with one remote built into the system. You can flip right back to regular TV, DVR, and you have full access to all your content wherever you go. This promotion with the 3 months free, guys, it's only limited time. So call today. We'll also throw in movie channels and dinner at JCW's. Ask also about our internet offers. You name it, I have it. I have all the internet options. In fact, I don't think there's another company out there that you can call and be able to lay out, well, you have this provider and this provider that are available, and these are the prices. And we're talking from $20 to $50 really is what you're looking at. So if you're spending a lot more than that, call us up. We'll lower your bill, save you money, and get you installed as early as next day. 424-DISH. It's 801-424-DISH.
All right, Bill stopped by today, courtesy of our friends at Outlaw Distilling, a new partner on the ESPN Sports Network. Outlaw Distillery, a homegrown, grain-to-glass, nitty-gritty whiskey, vodka, rum, and moonshine distillery right here in Salt Lake County. Outlaw Distillery, Utah grown, with so much history here of cowboys, outlaws, mining, and more. Outlaw has everything on the spirit spectrum, from their spiced rum, vanilla bean rum, Outlaw coffee rum, honey bourbon, barrel-proof whiskey, vodka, and moonshine. They have it all, and they're embracing the Outlaw name by being rebellious and making some very unique spirits that aren't being seen or created by any other distilleries in Utah. Passionate group, happy to have them on board. If you want to take a sip of their spirits, you can either find their bottles in local liquor stores or book a tasting. Tell them I sent you. It's an hour and a half. You get to keep your shot glasses as a souvenir. Get your tour and tasting booked at outlawdistillery.com today. The doors opened in 2015 as only the 4th distillery in the great state of Utah. Deeply rooted in Utah history and tradition, even the name Outlaw is inspired by legendary characters such as Butch Cassidy and the Outlaw Trail, which served as a primary transportation route for many of the notorious Wild West outlaws. The vision for Outlaw Distillery is clear. Help show the world that some of the best spirits can come from one of the least expected places, i.e. here in Utah. All right, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. Final hour of the program on a Monday afternoon is next, right here on ESPN 700. Give me a time set. All right, let's get a Drive at 5 time Monday afternoon style. 8 minutes past the hour, 5 o'clock. It is a hot day outside. It's going to be kind of a weird weather week. We have really hot days and then random, like, cool down days. It's supposed to be, like 79 degrees on Saturday, 69 degrees on Sunday. We're looking at about 89 degrees. A little cloudy here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. But, of course, as it is every day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Commute home on a Monday starts right now. Happy Monday to you. Hope you had a great weekend. It's been a very, very busy show. We are about 1 hour and 20 minutes away from tip-off in Oklahoma City for Game 5 of the NBA Finals between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers. Of course, on Friday night, OKC was able to get it done down the stretch, and now this series is deadlocked at 2 games apiece. Oklahoma City is a massive favorite in this game. At last check, they're a 9.5-point favorite to win. They're, of course, a massive favorite in Vegas to win the series. But you never know how it's going to go. It will be hockey's turn tomorrow. The battle for Lord Stanley's Cup resumes tomorrow night in Florida, where the Panthers will try to eliminate the Edmonton Oilers. They're up 3-2. It has been a tremendous series, and it always is. I mean, we're a new hockey market, but if you're new to the Stanley Cup postseason, hopefully you have been wildly entertained. 3 of the games have gone to overtime, and randomly the Panthers have smoked the Oilers in 2 games, so they'll try to close it out to win their second straight Stanley Cup tomorrow night at 6 o'clock Mountain Time. The TV coverage is Turner Sports. It's on TNT. And we are your radio home for both the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Finals in the market. RSL was able to get all 3 points over the weekend. They broke that 7-match, soccer fans, winless streak by beating DC 2-0. Johnny Russell opened up his bank account, and Gozo got his second goal of the season. RSL, another week off. They're going to be on the road against Sporting Kansas City on the 28th. NBA draft is right around the corner. Yegor Demon found out he will be in the green room for draft night. Our draft night coverage will take place right after we say goodnight on both the 25th and the 26th. We'll have round 1 coverage for you and round 2 coverage for you beginning at 6 o'clock Mountain Time. Going to bring in Richard Smith and Gordy Chiesa, 2 guys that were in draft rooms for decades, quite frankly. I'll anchor our coverage, and we'll take you through the entire first round and see what the Jazz decide to do. As of now, they have number 5 and number 21, a couple of second-round picks to boot as well. Been talking a lot today about the Grizzlies trade. They sent Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic in exchange for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Cole Anthony, 4 unprotected first-round picks, and 1 first-round pick swap. What does that indicate about the mentality of teams in the West, juxtaposed to what Oklahoma City has already built? And is this a calculation done by front offices where they've decided to punt on teams that not too long ago were thought to be one of the most exciting up-and-coming teams in the NBA? Brian Windhorst has reported that he's been told the Utah Jazz are actually going to try to trend up this offseason and try to add pieces to the group to help them win more games next year. I don't necessarily know that I agree with that, but of course, only time will tell. So a lot going on the show. Started things off with Kurt Schmidt, who stopped by to talk a little RSL. Diego Luna, I thought, was the best player for the U.S. men's national team in their first foray into Gold Cup play this year. Took care of Trinidad and Tobago 5-0. Diego had 2 assists. One of those probably should have been a goal. But unfortunately, it deflected off a teammate, so he got credited with the assist. So Diego will be with the U.S. men's national team throughout their Gold Cup run. A lot of players need to step up in his absence. J.J. Spahn won his first major championship of his career over the weekend at Oakmont, knocking down a 64-foot putt on 18 to take home $4.3 million, and he is your U.S. Open champ. All right, a lot of rumors about what the Jazz may do or what they may not do. One option is to engage with the San Antonio Spurs about the number 2 pick. With that number 2 pick, grab Dylan Harper, and maybe you have your point guard of the future. Of course, NBA Finals Game 5. Desmond Bane has been traded. What's next with Kevin Durant? What's next with the Boston Celtics? We'll bring in Tom Haberstroh coming up on the other side to talk about all those topics on a busy Monday show. Good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. You know, it's weird when you do a radio show with somebody for a number of years, how odd, like, inside jokes emerge. I honestly don't remember how Jericho Road became a thing on the show I did with Bill for, I don't know, 6 years, whatever that was. Our producer was a young man who is named Jason Shepard, who works for BYU TV. Sweet guy, very I'll just say he's working where he should be working, and I'll leave it at that. I don't remember if Shep was the one that brought up Jericho Road. All I know is last week, after one of the shows, I'm home decompressing, and Riles texts me like, "Hey, when I'm on the show next, bring me in with some Jericho Road." Jericho Road is a Mormon boy band. I don't know how else to articulate it. So when it was like NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, 98 Degrees, the boy band thing was everywhere. Bunch of bros down in Provo decided to start their own boy band. And the videos that they made are exactly what you would expect, I guess is how I'll put that. And they do have a member that looks like Tony Jones. I don't know. Have you watched any of the videos since Bill brought this up?
I haven't, but I do remember a little bit of this inside joke before. So I've looked him up before. There's a guy that looks a bit like Tony.
And at this point, Have you been able to learn whether or not they're still doing it? Are they still I mean, there can't be anything more awkward than a boy band when every member's in their like mid to late 40s.
Yeah, I mean, can you call that a boy band?
A man band, a middle-aged man band.
At that point, Jericho Rhodes' last, let's see, their last release, Spence, was it looks like 2010. So.
All right. Well, they did the thing for a while, and good for them for, pursuing their dream. So we'll end the show with some Jericho Road. I don't know how that lands with you, but there you go. All right, fun show, ton going on. Don't forget NBA draft right around the corner. We're going to have a bunch of coverage for you guys, a lot of rumors surrounding the Utah Jazz. NHL Stanley Cup playoffs resume tomorrow for the battle of Lord Stanley's Cup, but the NBA Finals coming your way, coming up on the other side. Porter, tomorrow, are we talking about OKC up 3-2 or Indiana up 3-2?
Man, my brain is telling me OKC. It's the better team. It's the better roster. I love the way Indiana's fighting, man. And I think that now that we're here, we're at a best of three scenario. I really do think that this is as close to a toss-up as you could have asked for if you're the Indiana Pacers coming into the series. Now, I know that Vegas is saying it's still OKC, a heavy favorite, but man, I give Tyrese Halliburton and the Pacers a big chance tonight. And hell, for the sake of the show, I'll go Indiana.
All right, there you go. All right, we will say goodnight. Coming up on the other side, it is time for Game 5 of the NBA Finals between the Pacers and the Thunder. The Thunder are a 9.5-point favorite. Porter, what comes our way on a Tuesday edition of the show?
On a Tuesday edition of The Drive, well, it'll be Tony Parks and I in the saddle. So we'll recap, of course, NBA Finals action, Indiana and OKC tonight. We'll look ahead to the NHL Stanley Cup and talk some off-season football, baseball, whatever comes along with Tony and I. Stevenson Sylvester, 74 days from Utah football. Tim McMahon, of course, for the NBA Daily Assist. Belle Frazier will stop by. And like I said, Tony Parks will be in with myself.
Yeah, give Tony and Porter your ears tomorrow. I'll be back on a Wednesday show. We'll say goodnight and special thank you today to Kurt Schmidt, Tom Haberstroh, Richard Smith, and Bill Riley. For any of the sound you may have missed from the show today, go to the website, which is ESPN700sports.com. Download our mobile app and take us on the go. The ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. Then finally, for what we do in our space every afternoon, check out our podcast page where you can dig through all of the content, then decide which portion of it you want to listen to on your time. Don't want to talk Utah? Okay. Don't want to talk BYU, Jazz, RSL? You get a pick, whatever you want to listen to on our podcast page. It's awesome. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments. Give us all the stars. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Enjoy your Monday evening NBA Finals, Game 5. Coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 792 on FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network.